Good evening, Council, and welcome to our meeting of Wednesday, October the 14th. Welcome also to those who are on the Zoom call with us this evening. And I'm not seeing yet that we're live streaming, but I'll go to Councillor. Oh, it says now that we are live streaming on YouTube. So welcome all you YouTubers, and thank you for being here with us tonight. We really do appreciate it. We are still choosing to follow the direction of the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit and have our meetings virtually. And so we'll continue to do so as long as the health unit feels that's the way we should be operating. So I want to welcome you to our virtual meeting for this evening and ask you if you have a cell phone or anything that might interrupt you while you're speaking, if you could please put that on mute. I would also let you know that we are audio and video recording this evening's meeting and live streaming, and it shall form part of the public record, and we will be retaining that according to the town's retention bylaw. And if you want more information about that bylaw, you can contact the clerk's office. I'm going to check with Councillor Nicol, who's always checking to make sure our YouTube is working properly so people can see us. Councillor Nicol, it's not working yet. Just check with IT to see if we're up and running. We're good to go? Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so now we'll go to the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Oh, sorry, my mistake. We'll go to open forum first. We did have an open forum participant this evening. My apologies. So for the open forum, we would ask that any person speaking for open forum, if they could do it in about 2 minutes, that would be very much helpful. And tonight we have someone pre-registered to speak regarding the Cross Street Bridge replacement, and that is Alistair Hunter Gaffer. Mr. Hunter Gaffer, are you on the? You are. Welcome. I can see you, I can hear you. And I will also let you know that the assistant clerk did forward your PowerPoint presentation and your notes, so we all have a copy of those.
Thank you so much. So good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council members. My name is Alistair, and this is my wife, Kimberly. We did forward you the information about our properties at 1783 St. John's Road and 900 Clifton Boulevard. This is in regards to the extreme flooding on the of Banks Creek. Each year, we continue to see increased flooding and land erosion. The replacement of the culvert at St. John's and 7th Line with a larger culvert has made the issue worse. The erosion has caused trees to fall on our house, causing extensive damage. The culvert under our driveway is no longer able to accommodate the excess water, causing stormwater to flow over the top of the driveway, causing flooding and ice buildup on our driveway. If the issue is not addressed, it will impact the foundation of our house. We've lost more than 6 feet of land due to erosion. The flooding from the culvert has carved away a huge section of our front lawn. We've spent thousands of dollars in tree removal and repairs to our property, resulting from the flooding and erosion. Our cars have been frozen to our driveway, unable to move with the flooding in the wintertime. We're unable to go into our backyard after heavy rainfalls and during spring thaw, as the creek is raging and extremely dangerous. And at times it's even dangerous to walk in our driveway when the flooding is occurring, because you could easily be swept into the creek. We have in the past reached out to the town and to the Conservation Authority with no response, but we're hoping that now you will be able to assist us by shoring up the banks of the creek on our property, as was done along St. John's Road, and helping with replacement of the culvert under the driveway. Please don't allow any more damage to occur to our home or our property or personal harm as a result of the flooding. We'd be happy to provide you with more information if required, and we've also provided Amber Leal with all the photos, videos, and information. She's been extremely helpful. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, both of you. And if you want to, you can either stay on the Zoom call. If you turn your video off, that would be helpful, and mute yourself. But we will be dealing with that under item, I think it's C.6, I believe it is. C.6 tonight. So that item will be on agenda tonight. If you'd be more comfortable not on the Zoom, you can always log off and follow us on the live stream as well. But thank you very much for that presentation. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So next is the approval of the agenda. We have had a couple of agenda repair and some additions. So we have had two delegations that have registered, 6.1 and 6.2, both regarding item C1. And then we had a small amendment on the item recommendation 2.3 on item C4. Replacing the word from 18 meters to 17 meters. And I understand that was in consultation with a meeting recently with the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority that happened just recently. So I understand the live stream just started working now, so people may be wondering what they missed. So I just wanted to let you know that, welcome you first of all, and sorry for the technical difficulties. We just were getting started. We did open the meeting, and we did hear on open forum from Alistair and Kim, who live on are just off the Banks Creek, and we're dealing with an item on Banks Creek tonight, which is item C.6. And that's all we've done so far. And then now we're just doing the approval of the agenda with a few adjustments for tonight's agenda. So I've got you caught up to speed, and welcome, and thank you all for joining us. So now could I ask if there's a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda as amended? And that would be Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Orsatti. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest? Is there any perceived or conflicts of interest that any member has for this evening's meeting? Seeing none, if one occurs to you during the course of the meeting, please just make it known to us. So next is presentations and petitions. We have none of those. And after that, we have delegations. And our first delegation for this evening is Claire Malcolmson. Claire is with the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition. So Claire, if you want to turn on your video and audio now. The delegations are allowed up to 10 minutes. Our suggestion is always, if you can go a little less than 10 minutes, it gives us opportunity to ask questions. But that's the goal, and you'll see the deputy clerk, once we've reached the 9.5-minute mark, she'll turn her video on. So Claire, welcome, and thank you for being here, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dolan and Deputy Mayor Davidson, and all the members of council and members of the public that are listening tonight. I'm the executive director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, but before that, I'm a 6th-generation cottager in Innisfil. I'm here to talk about the Orbit mobility proposal and the MZO proposal. So the information that the town presented is what we as members of the public have to work with. The bulk of my delegation really consists of questions. You may have considered these, you may have answers to these, but as a member of the public, I have not read it all, and I am not going to read it all. I did read the staff report. I don't think it's the public's duty to investigate the details of arcane policy tools and their implications for the future. So we're really relying on council and staff to get clarity and assurances on any pieces of this process and plan that feel odd and that the public is asking about. Please be questioning. You have an obligation to the future, to the economy, the environment, and to the integrity of the social fabric of the town of Innisfil. So I have a few points to make. I'm aiming for 5 minutes. So the use of ministerial zoning orders, or MZOs, it's really on the rise. There have been at least 6 of these used in Simcoe County. I am not a fan of the process using an MZO. Provincial documents say that they really should be used in Northern Ontario when municipal organization is not capable of planning development and projects, or specifically for projects in the provincial interest. And I guess my first question is, why is suddenly a GO station? There are lots of GO stations in Ontario. Why is that suddenly something of such high provincial interest. Innisfil has not had a GO station for a really long time. So I know it's important, but I'm wondering if it justifies this. The use of NZO also really leads to fragmented planning, population allocations, infrastructure, and in particular, wastewater, water and wastewater are questions that I feel were not answered in the staff report. I'd really love it if council can get more clarity about that, and in the next version, if there are more details about that. So the MZO approach really undermines regional planning. It really amounts to a bit of a frantic gold rush approach to planning. The province, though, has facilitated allowing developers to call the shots, I think, by making it clear that municipalities can and should use MZOs. I think that the MZO is problematic, and I think that you see a lot of community response because people don't like the use of these because there's a lot of public process that is missing. And in this case, it's unclear what public information would be available later. I think a lot of people that I've talked to would like to have more information about that because of what we do know about the obscurity of MZOs. So I think we really should scrutinize this plan. I think that this whole proposal really looks a lot like it serves the developers and landowners. And I'm concerned that that would, that should not be the priority over people of the town and the taxpayers of the town and the sustainability of the town as well and the lake. So I really think that you should be thinking as we go through all of this, what does the developer really want to build? What would be most profitable for them to build? The model that we're seeing looks very environmentally friendly and very progressive in a lot of ways on paper, but it's not the most profitable way for a developer to build, and they often want to make as much money as they can. So what would they want to do? And does the plan that we see here guarantee what the Orbit plan lays out? And what if some of the pieces start to fall apart and the density doesn't come? I mean, are there any independent research? Is there any market research that supports this model? I mean, I don't think people are lining up to get condos in a farm field. So, what if that doesn't work? What's plan B? What is ultimately going to be built here? I think we need much more assurance than the MZO process allows, especially given the potential size of this thing, 150,000 people down the road in a generation, I know. So if there isn't, I think that the town should also take a little bit more time, at least 2 more weeks for public consultation than what you are proposing in order for the town and the staff to incorporate the feedback and actually dig into some of these questions. I think it would be really smart for the town to have an independent lawyer look at the MZO and answer some of the questions that so far, myself and probably lots of other people and councillors as well may still have about the proposal. So the sustainability principles really look good on paper, but they're very much lacking in details and enforcement. I mean, it's not hard to determine which LEED standard something is being built, if it's LEED community or what. And without that kind of detail, it really lacks confidence, in my opinion. So again, the water and wastewater questions, servicing allocation, how does that work? I mean, is this all of the growth for Innisfil forever? How did the other towns feel about that? There are lots of questions, and I just encourage you to take your time to think them through and do what's best for the town and the environment and the lake in the future. Thank you very much for considering my points.
Thanks very much, Claire. Appreciate you being here. Questions or questions for Claire's presentation? Any questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll be dealing with the presentation coming up fairly shortly, and I'm sure some of the things that you addressed in your comments, Ms. Malcolmson, will be dealt with during that conversation. I could see a lot of people busy taking notes, so we'll make sure we answer your questions then, and thank you again.
All right, my pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So the delegation regarding the Orbit Ministerial Zoning Order be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Nicol and Councillor Van Berkel, all those in favor? That is carried. Next, we have another delegation. This one is a delegation by Stephen Kirschenblatt, and it is on the same item, the Orbit Ministerial Zoning Order. Mr. Kirschenblatt, I see your name. If you want to put on your video, you're more than welcome to at this time and address council. Same rules, maximum of 10 minutes. And if you want time for questions, then a little shorter. And the clerk's office will put their video on when you're getting close to the end of that time. So welcome and thank you for being here again. I think you've been in front of us before and appreciate you coming back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Am I good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just for everybody, I guess, that's joining the meeting, public that is seeing this meeting, I'm an architect. I've been an architect for over 40 years, and I have served the development community of the Greater Toronto Area, Southern Ontario for a long time, working with some of the major developers of the province. And over my course of my career, I have not seen any project and have not been aware of the use and the prevalent use of MZOs to expedite planning and development in the province. And I have some major concerns with the use of the MZO. I have major concerns with the whole nature of the Orbit vision and its implementation. I think just to keep things on time, I prepared a statement, so I think I'll just read it out and then maybe finish off, and maybe if there's a discussion, I'm available. So it has been 3 months since I last spoke to you all, and over the past 3 months, I've continued to explore and understand what is behind this rush to implement the Orbit vision. My due diligence led me to start worrying that this council might resort to a ministerial zoning order, an MZO, to expedite the approval of a vision that would forever change this beautiful rural community. And lo and behold, here we are. The people behind this abuse of process should be ashamed of themselves. And I say that really with all respect, and I've been speaking to staff about this over the past 3 months, and I'm really quite astounded that we are at this point in time. I've had numerous calls with our local MPP, Andrea Kanjan, to understand Metrolinx's role, in pushing density to have the station built. And she has found no such demand. She has advised that she has not commented on the Orbit vision as it's a local matter. However, now that this council might initiate an MZO process, there's suddenly a provincial interest. She advised that an MZO would never happen without widespread community support. And as I said, in my 40 years as an architect, I have not seen a design or vision implemented by an MZO. I have learned that the province has issued 8 MZOs over the past 2 years. The optics of this are not favorable and are very concerning. A Globe and Mail article entitled, "Ontario issues special orders to approve developers' plans and squash opposition," written on May 26, 2020, and I suggest all of you that are listening to this, find that article and read it, suggests that MZOs are, quote, rewards for well-connected lobbyists and Premier Doug Ford's PC party donors. Innisfil should think twice about getting involved with an MZO, especially for this project. So I fully read staff's report, DSR 15420, and the opening paragraph states, council approved the design of the station at its July 15th, 2020 council meeting. The meeting in July did not approve a design, as no design was provided, as noted by Councillor Van Berkel. Councillor merely approved the design of the station to move forward. There was no discussion of advancing the larger Orbit vision. And as you can see, the report includes Orbit images that have not changed since the original Orbit design was published out there, a few months ago. These are just artist renderings. They are not the work of an architect qualified to design such complex structures. It appears to be a university thesis, and that's all that it is. The report is honest in asking for an MZO to assist the developers to obtain financing for this project, including advancing real designs with qualified architects and engineers. The question is, why does this developer need an MZO to create this vision? No MZO created Friday Harbor. The costs to create Friday Harbor were huge. If a design has real merit, private money will back it. This design does not have real merit. The reason is the vision is not economically feasible without long-term commitments. It places an extravagantly expensive station at its first phase without even proving the demand for the luxurious residential units that are going to pay for it. Affordable housing, as spoken to in the planning report, in this expensive housing format is a fallacy. We have not seen yet what this developer is really prepared to build. He is hiding behind staff and to push through this freedom to do whatever he wants. The developer or town does not need an MZO to show what can be built in accordance with our official plan. And they can show us their vision to bring the population of our town to levels approved in the OP for 2030 through an OP amendment. The minister and province cannot ask any more of us at this time. By moving forward with an MZO, you're asking residents to believe that the only way a GO station will be erected on the 6th line is to commit to the orbit vision and a new city of 150,000 people. Show us a letter from Metrolink saying it will revoke their commitment to a modest station as shown in their 2018 business case study. Show us a letter from Metrolink that only permit a station to be built to serve the orbit vision. Show us the demand for this station to be finished by 2020. The orbit survey shows 50% of the 490 people polled would use the GO line 1 to 3 times a month. This is hardly enough demand to proceed with an undemocratic MZO that will change our town forever. To be clear, I am not advocating against the GO station or development. My livelihood was based on doing that, okay? I advocated for a lot of development. And, you know, I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish as an architect. I'm advocating for a full and complete secondary plan to create a place that truly fulfills the goals stated in the staff report. The orbit design is not that place. An MZO is not the way to implement it. Let's lobby for a modest, cost-effective GO station that will encourage the development of the surrounding lands in a way that involves all of us, a place that is spoken about in our current official plan and protects Lake Simcoe and the environmentally sensitive lands around it. Let's do this when the COVID pandemic is over, when the residents of this town can participate fully, not virtually, and with clear minds. I urge all of you to approve recommendation number 2 in this item by suggesting alternative steps to move forward. And these steps should inform staff that this council will not look to an MZO to determine the appropriate design of a GO station at the 6th line and the development of the lands around it. And so I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to speak to this. I will be continually to follow the progress of moving forward with this. I support Claire, the previous speaker, Claire's idea of the 2-week timeline that you have to bring it to the public and get public involvement before bringing it back to council is an unrealistic time frame given the circumstances of where we're at in the world today. This is a big deal, and I don't believe that the public is fully engaged. I got involved with your Get Involved Innisfil website that has it well set up, very accommodating, but not so easy to find. It has a discussion forum on it. I was the only one that ever put anything onto that forum. So the public is really not fully engaged in understanding really what's going on here. And like the mayor of Barrie told me, that he is not worried about the Orbit vision because it was just an Innisfil vision. It was not a formal application. He doesn't comment on it at this time, but he has major concerns if it was ever to move forward in a properly planning process where he and other municipalities around Bradford, and Simcoe County will have an opportunity to really comment on this implementation of this type of new city next door to Barrie, which is not really where I believe any of you on council were given any authority at the last election. It was not an election item. It was never on anybody's radar. And I don't believe you have, as a council, the mandate to implement such a major change to the town of Innisfil and the wonderful, beautiful official plan that was created only 2 years ago, and to throw it up in the air and continue on with this. So let's slow it down. Let's create a proper planning process with lots of public involvement, not afraid of any appeal to an LPAT, and let's do it fairly and properly.
Thank you, Mr. Kirschenblatt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Kirschenblatt? Seeing none, if you want to stay on, you can, and you mute and turn off your video camera. We'd appreciate it. And as you might expect, I'm sure somebody might be pulling item C.1, and I'm sure we might be having some discussion on that tonight. So thank you for that. So can we have a mover and a seconder, please, to move the recommendation that the delegation be received? Thank you, Councillor Waters and Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That is carried. I'm sorry if I'm calling on the same people all the time. It's because of where you are on my screen. So please don't take any offense if I keep calling on the same two people. I'll try to be fair and spread it around. All righty then. So next item is County Council, Municipal Association, and Conservation Authority. Any committee updates that anybody has to share? Councillor Nicol.
Hey, Worship. Obviously, with the Navaswaga Valley Conservation Authority, we did send the budget off to council for review tonight. It's a 30-day review, so I think the staff at the NVCA have worked very hard, and the board as well, to try and come in with a very, very tight budget to try and get through these terrible times. So that'll be something we'll be reviewing later on. That's all from the NVCA.
Thank you. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor, did you have anything from yesterday's county meeting?
Not at this time. It's just that we're going to be going probably into a new style of voting for the new warden and deputy warden in the future. Other than that, no, I'm cool at the moment.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'd just like to take a moment and give council a quick update on something that the county is top of mind for the county right now, and that is an outbreak that has occurred in one of the 4 of the county's long-term care homes, and it's the one in Beaton, which is called Simcoe Manor. It's a rather large outbreak. There's over 30 residents now, I believe 34 residents and about 20 staff that have tested positive. The Simcoe Manor had requested RVH come in and help, and they have deployed a response team there simply because so many of the staff are unable to work right now. I'll tell you that the general manager is there. She is she's at the manor. She's rolled up her sleeves, and certainly the community of Beaton is really very much behind and fully supports all the residents and the staff there. And one of the things that they have done is they've opened a dedicated, communications key during these times when family and friends are so concerned about their loved ones in long-term care home. And they have opened up a dedicated phone line and a dedicated email only for families to make sure that they can always get through and somebody's always there to answer them. So we're in full support of the county home and doing everything we can to help them through this crisis. The other update was that the county registered it for 211 for another year. The 211 service is, for some reason, we just don't get the uptake here in Innisfil. Some of the other municipalities really use it a lot, and I don't think use it to our fullest. We'll have to make a point of making sure that when you do get those calls from someone, whether it's they've lost their job or they're looking for home daycare or they're looking for a ride to the hospital or anything like that, 211 is the go-to that has all of that information. And what I just learned from Mayor Lehman yesterday was they also will share data back to us, aggregated, of course, to protect people's privacy, but we can find out from 211 what people from Innisfil are calling them about. So that'll give us an idea of what the needs are in our community. So I think it's something we can do more of. My last comment is on the School Zone and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee that Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Sadi and I sit on. We have had a vacancy. We are now currently advertising for members of the community to come and sit on that committee. So please, if you know of somebody who would be interested, please have them apply. It is a voluntary position. It takes about 2 hours once a month and probably an hour of the to prep for it, but it's something that's really needed in our community. And finally, I should tell you that the Friday Harbor 300-day rule that we dealt with a couple of weeks ago, that was also approved by Simcoe County. So seeing no one else, we'll move on for consent agenda items. So for those of you who are new or have maybe never come to one of our council meetings, we do operate our committee of the whole in consent agenda style. So all of the staff reports are listed in our agenda. If council is satisfied with the recommendation made by staff, we'll pass by it. If they want to have further conversation, ask a question, change a recommendation, they'll refer it to committee of the whole where we have a more fulsome discussion. It just helps us move through things faster so we're not busy reading recommendations on approval of minutes and things like that that are fairly much housekeeping matters. So we'll get started. So our first consent agenda item was the special council meeting minutes dated September the 16th, 2020. And that was a review of our strategic plan. Seeing none, A2, the special council meeting minutes of September 23. A3, council meeting minutes dated September 23, the regular meeting. B1, the Innisfil Municipal Heritage Committee Report 0620 dated September the 3rd. I just had one question if I could, and perhaps to Councillor Payne. It was in regards with the rehabilitation or the restoration versus building of the bridges on the Trans-Canada Trail. And it looks like there's still some objection from members of the committee that are interested in somehow preserving that. Is that been resolved?
The staff are still working on that. They are making repairs. I think what the issue is that they're wanting to keep the heritage part of the bridge intact, and other parts they can't use that or do that, but they just want to keep it as a heritage bridge. And I think what was requested is if they can't keep the main bridge, at least have parts of it put close to the bridge or a plaque put on to state how old the bridge is and that it's still a heritage bridge. Even though it's going to be a newer bridge, it's still a heritage bridge. So
thank you, Councillor Payne.
It's time. I think it'll finally get going.
Thank you. I think a comment I made before is I think that bridge has been probably repaired so many times. There's not that much original part to it, but I thank you so much for that.
if I could just say one more thing about the hair dye, I don't want to bring it on and bring it forward, but we're finding that a lot of the homes that are bought and probably mostly are for developing, and the homes are just left to rot, and there's no incentive to keep the houses looking nice. And these are properties of the town, and you go by and you see the derelict homes, and that's what they are. And it's just like asking or letting people know, I'm empty. Come and loot it. Come and do damage to it. So if there's some way we could stop this, that would be great. So that's just one of the problems that is always brought up at the meetings.
Thank you, Council. I believe that was sorry, I think you're frozen a little bit. Okay, there you are. But I think that was an action item brought forward that staff are working on. So I imagine we'll be seeing something come forward fairly soon. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Item C.1. Nobody wants to bring that forward. No, I'm just kidding. Deputy Mayor Davidson is pulling that item. Okay, item C.2, the evolution of customer service experience. Councillor Orsatti. You want to pull that item? Item C.3, the recommendation from Council Strategy Workshop. I think it was a lot of really great work. If you haven't had a chance to go through it in detail, I'm sure Ken would very much appreciate any of your further comments before he comes back with his further report. Councillor Nicol?
Thank you, Worship. I didn't need to pull it. I should have mentioned this staff before, but obviously reading through the entire document. On page 8 of the SWOT analysis, there may be some confusion, but I believe it was the walk-up house that was being discussed, not the Walker house. So if somebody's reading it, they won't quite know what we're talking about, but just it wasn't a major issue, but just so it gets captured.
Thank you for that. Yes, it said Walker, and I'm sure it was walk up. We'll make that correction. Okay. Item C4, the community planning permit for the Maple Road swimming pool. So just reminding council that there was an amendment in the original agenda, approval of the agenda, to change that from 18 meters to 17 meters. Item C5, that was the in-water boathouse. Any, Councillor Sadi, is that, oh no, you're just lifting up your page, sorry. Anyone want to pull that item, speak to it? Seeing none. Item C6, the Cross Street Bridge replacement update. Councillor Bill Van Berkel, you want to pull that one?
Your Worship, I'll pull it because we did have a deputation on it, so.
Thank you.
So we can discuss it.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Item D1, Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Just a comment, in reading the report today, I'm glad to see this move forward. I have been down to that area and it does need severe repair. So I support this ambition and endeavor 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I concur with Deputy Mayor Davidson. Just reading the report, I was just really, really happy with how the community recognized the significance of that part, and I know we are getting close to November 11th, and it's very significant, and I think we should do everything we can to support that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you very much to both the Lefroy, the Belle Legion and the Alliston Legion for their contributions to this restoration. And I really want to thank staff and the committee for understanding the sensitivity surrounding the trees there. And just to make sure that there is communication go out before a chainsaw goes in there, because the community will be very upset if they see a tree. They understand that it has to be maintained, but each one of those trees represents a person. So so it is very sensitive, and you can tell in the report it's being treated very much that way, and I very much appreciate that. No one's pulling it though, so we'll move on to E1, which is the bylaw on the fees and charges. Effective January 1st, we had a long and fulsome discussion on this item at a previous meeting, and this is the passing of the bylaw with all of the changes that we recommended. Anyone want to pull that? Nope. All right, F1, which Councillor Nichols spoke to, it's the NVCA budget booklet. That'll be coming to our full day, one of our 2 full day budget meetings coming up to a Zoom meeting pretty soon, I would think. All right, then item G1, there's a bunch of G items. Is there anybody want to pull that? We have the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, the In-Services Board meetings, the Office of the Solicitor General correspondence, and the Fire Marshal's correspondence. I just want to point out quickly the Fire Marshal's correspondence, because it was a hugely precedent-setting arbitration agreement up in Sudbury, where an arbitrator in Sudbury was deciding level of service in in a fire hall, a rather remote rural fire hall. And of course that had the whole province worried that now all of a sudden an arbitrator was going to decide the level of service for each of our communities. And Fire Marshal Pegg made it clear that the level of service in our communities is a decision of council and not that of the arbitrator. So that was a good letter to get. All right, and that's everything. So nobody's pulling any of those items. So we'll go now to the consent list continued. Those are the items that have been pulled. Did we get those, clerk's office get those right? All right, and so can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the consent list? Councillor Nicol and Councillor Fowler, all those in favor? That's carried. And we'll move to committee of the whole. Mover and a seconder to move into committee of the whole. Councillor Orsatti and Councillor Ices, all those in favor? And that is carried. All right. So our first item up is item C1, and I think that was Deputy Mayor who pulled that. Deputy Mayor, do you have a seconder?
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship.
Did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just speak briefly. I know the concerns with this MZO, and I have my same concerns and doubts as well, how big this is and how it could impact Innisfil's growth. There's 3 things that I, myself personally, I have looked at that I understand, and I would like probably some clarification later in my follow-up question. The orbit, the 250 meters, we understand we needed to support the GO station. I mean, it has to be busy, it has to be occupied in that area, and people need to use it more than once a week to make it viable for the province and for all of us. So I do understand the growth in that 250 meter circle area. Outside of that, I have my reservations about it. Secondly, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong through staff, if we require this growth on the 6th line, this MZO is partially to help with the infrastructure situation through in-services and to help service the 400 corridor, which would bring jobs to Innisfil. The 2 are related because of the line running up the 6th line, the interchange at the 6th line possibly in the future. My third reason for the MZO, I think you'll see in the recommendation that I put an amendment through this afternoon, that in this proposal on page 18 of 26, the very last proposal is to have affordable and attainable housing available for the next generation. Next generation being millennials, whatever, or also for seniors. And it's a new proposal that hasn't been used since the 80s, where the developer holds back the mortgage or takes a mortgage back for a lower amount. They can't flip it in the first 5 years or 10 years. The longer they stay there, they get that resale value fully back if they sell it after staying a period of time. So I can understand the reason for the growth, but with the size of the MZO and the pressure and the voice of the community, I did receive a lot of emails and telephone calls. It's nice that people from other communities have a concern in Innisfil, but I'd rather listen to the people of Innisfil first. It's their neighborhood that's going to be impacted. So I will leave it at that. And my follow-up is to ask from Tim Keynes, and I saw a report that he did send to Councillor Sadi this afternoon, that we're not in the developer's hands. I'll let him explain that. But I would like clarification on the connection between the orbit in services and the servicing of the 400 so we can understand if this is really necessary. Other than that, let's move ahead. Thanks.
So you spoke about amendment. I don't see an amendment up. Did you have an amendment that you wanted to put forward?
I sent it to Patty this afternoon. Here it is here.
Okay.
There it is there.
And do you have a seconder for your amendment? Councillor Van Berkel, are you seconding that amendment, Councillor Van Berkel? I can't see.
I can, Your Worship, yeah.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Rayner, I'm wondering from the clerk's point of view now, does this mean we can only discuss the amendment or can we discuss the original motion?
Your Worship, yes. Normally when we do an amendment, the discussion is limited to the amendment.
So I'm gonna ask a favor of the mover and the seconder if they would withhold the amendment for now so we can have a fulsome discussion on the original motion and then come in with the amendment at the end. And that would make it just a lot easier. Is that okay, Deputy Mayor?
Sure.
I'm in favor of that, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the original motion then. And I see that Mr. Rayner and who's our CAO and Mr. Kane, who is our Director of Growth, have turned on their cameras and are ready to answer the Deputy Mayor's questions.
Thank you, Worship. Members of Council, I'll get started and then I'll ask Director Kane to follow up. I can specifically address the question from the Deputy Mayor regarding servicing and make a comment perhaps about the infrastructure more broadly. So it is true that the orbit has been very much in the minds of those development leaders in our community who have thankfully stepped up to front-end finance the significant wastewater plant expansion to the tune of nearly, well, the cost is nearly $100 million to expand in this third phase of our wastewater plant. So that's a significant commitment, financial commitment, and a number of those developers that are in the orbit are a part of that conversation. And that agreement contemplated both those that have approval, land use planning approvals, as well as the opportunity for those who don't yet have land use planning approvals, but to be added into the mix, if I can put it that way, and continue and add front-end financing for additional allocation in the near future. So the agreement was very much created and drafted and negotiated with the orbit in mind. And so I would say that they are related, as the Deputy Mayor pointed out. The interchange, there is a commitment from one of the lead developers to provide significant front-end financing to potential interchange at Highway 400 and the 6th line. This has continued to be a project that we've been working on and with the Ministry of Transportation. That project received a significant boost, as you know, when Innisfil Heights was approved by the minister, the expansion was approved by the minister. And so there is a very compelling case shaping up for an interchange at the 6th line, both because of its ability to service the industrial lands, which of course Mr. Kane can speak to better than I can, but as well as service what is undoubtedly a regional infrastructure and regional transportation component of a GO train station. There will be significant use of that station based on the use case. We understand the business case for Metrolinx, and so it does make good sense, and we hope to be able to advance that process moving forward. Her Worship and a number of other members of council did provide a delegation to the Minister of Transportation at AMO recently to continue to press for that need for that additional interchange. It has a number of other benefits as well, not just from the industrial side and serving Alcona and the orbit, including emergency preparedness related to what happens at the 400. Unfortunately, dare I say, snow season is coming, and managing what happens on that 400, unfortunately, regularly. So having additional access points is really critical from that perspective as well. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Did you have anything to add?
No, Your Worship. I think Mr. Rayner covered all those points. If there's outstanding questions, though, I am here to clarify as required.
Well, I think there'll be a lot of them. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too have been inundated with emails and phone calls because I guess it's in my ward, so I'm probably going to get more. And the most objective people are the ones that live the closest. And I can tell you that it hasn't been a fun weekend. It's a weekend where I lost sleep. And I've got to tell you that I was really torn with this MZO. You know, I read the report, looked at all the factors, and I have to be honest with you, I'm not really a fan of an MZO. They're all right for what they're meant for such things as the Tollendale, project. I think that was okay because it benefits all of the county and as well as, probably the province. The MZO that we're asking for now, though, is, in my opinion, does not. I mean, doesn't benefit anybody really, but Innisfil. It's a shortcut for development. It bypasses the normal procedure, and input from the public. Also, probably the largest MZO that anybody's ever asked for in this province. I went online and did some research, and yeah, the MZO has been used a few times, but nothing for this, nothing for the size of this project. So it makes me wonder, I do, however, know why we want and need this. The planning report is very well written, but I think it fails to put some of the most important things in there, like why we are doing this. This project is very, very, very expensive. I mean, and yes, development is upfronting it, but they need to know that in the end, that we are going to give them something that they can put their trust in, actually, because we're asking for a whole lot, as well as the knowledge that in the end that there's financial stability for both of us. We're asking, again, we're asking for a lot here from them, and in fairness, I think that's why we are trying to help them, that they and they asked for this MZO. But I think that the public consultation 2 weeks is way too short. I mean, I've got to, that this is where my real problem comes in. I think that, if we're going to do this, let's give the people a chance, to put in their input. Give them a month. I mean, what's 2 weeks more? Give them a month for input, and let's get all the input together, and then have another report written with the input from the people to see, where we're at, and also, why we are doing this. Financially, we need it, and for the development community, that they know that there's that we're working with them, and that there's a financial stability in the end. Because again, we're asking for an awful lot of money. I mean, and I think if we do that, then I can support something like this. But the way it is right now, I just have a real problem with it, and I don't know whether I can support it or not. And the same thing, you know, with what the deputy mayor is asking for. All those things need to be in a report. So, and the public has to have input. You know, there is sensitive property there, you know, that is environmentally sensitive. It needs to be looked at. We can't just go ahead and plow through and say we don't need consultation. We you know, I'm in favor of the orbit and the train station, but not the way we're doing it. I'm sorry, and those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Van Berkel. Yeah, definitely. You probably got a lot more phone calls than the rest of us, but we all got many emails. We were the recipient of a MailChimp call for action that went out on a few websites. Started, I think, with the Greenbelt Coalition of Simcoe County, which is why all the Springwater ones came in first, and then the Keswick ones, and they were all worded the same, and I responded to everyone, and you know, some didn't get back to me because I asked if they were an Innisfil resident, but many did, and once I prodded and pushed, I got a lot of great feedback and encouraged everybody to put it on the Get Involved Innisfil website. And what occurred to me throughout all that was there was a lot of people who really didn't have a clue of where we were going, like how we got to where we are. And it was all over the board. Some didn't care. They lived in Toronto. They just didn't want, they hated MZOs and they could care less what the project was. They just wanted MZOs done away with. At which case I told them to talk to the provincial government because, you know, we can't do that. There's some people who love the orbit, can't wait for the orbit, but don't want to do the MZO. There was some people who thought that we were just building houses in the middle of nowhere. They didn't know there was a GO train station involved. So there was a lot of different comments, which made me, and a lot of people who kept calling it sprawl. So I want to, I'd asked Mr. Kane if he would just take us back a little bit. I know council is familiar with this, but perhaps for the people watching, and kind of take us down that road of where we started and why we are where we are today. Mr. King, if you do that, and then we'll go back to questions.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. Yes, it wasn't meant to be a Thanksgiving present for council by any stretch, and rest assured we're all getting questions. And you know, the bright side of this is that, you know, we truly have an engaged community, and we're seeing that tonight. So you know, those are good things, and I'm happy to share a bit of the background just to help us, you know, hopefully answer some of the questions that have been asked, and also help answer some of the questions that haven't been asked. So if Ms. Tama could bring up the slide deck, I just have a brief slide deck to go over some of the themes that we've been hearing about. So, you know, the question is why we're here, and the title slide, you know, says that to some degree. We're here to talk about how to bring the GO station to the community, and looking at the potential use of an MZO to help accomplish that. I think we've heard amongst council before that we don't want to grow like our neighbors, and certainly there's some examples of that we've discussed in the past. And if we want to grow in Innisfil's terms, then, you know, we should be looking at, you know, different thinking and tools that reflect, you know, the orbit vision that, you know, isn't status quo in this province for growing. You know, there is a desire to concentrate growth, and thanks to council's forward thinking to date and continuing with the implementation of the orbit vision, you know, we're here to discuss, you know, ways that we can do that, and a draft MZO is one of those tools. You know, and to implement that vision through those tools, you know, to protect those things like the environment and those community care and the community character, and those things have been identified to us important in the past. Next slide, please, Patty. In terms of the timelines and the discussion regarding the amount of time of public consultation, what this slide doesn't show is the fact that back in 2005 was when the environmental assessment process identified a station by Metrolinx in the town of Innisfil. So we are now 15 years later. That EA process was reflected in the town's 2006 official plan. It was reflected in the 2012 Transportation Master Plan. So this has been talked about for quite some time. And at some point, there's a desire to get on with it and try and get that station for the community. Most recently, and what the timeline shows on the screen before you is basically the orbit visioning process, which started back in 2019 in May with a public RFP that went out and was awarded to partisans. We had a couple of orbit focus groups as that vision was developed, and then taking that vision to council November 27th, and that was why those milestones turned blue to orange, is to show when this hit the public domain. So it hasn't been a year yet; it's been about 10 months, just over 10 months. It has been in the public domain, and since that time, there's been the council workshop. There's been endorsement of and presentation of further design with respect to the station. And I think the report speaks to that design being adopted by council back in July. And then more recently in this fall, as things ramp up and, as, staff have been charged with trying to implement the direction that's been given, engaging with key organizations like Innisfil District Association as one, and certainly others to follow. And then tonight, talking with the ministerial zoning order, since that report went out a week ago on October 7th. And then, depending on discussion, when this comes back to council, tentatively suggested by staff to be October 28th, we can talk about that date as well. What's happened is, we're here at the technical implementation phase, and this isn't easy. It's a complicated vision, to be sure, and when you try and convert that into a planning narrative, it gets quite complicated. So, it's not necessarily trying to bamboozle or not give the public enough time. The reality is the vision has been sitting out there, and this is our draft document to show how we're proposing to implement that in technical terms. The purpose of the information report tonight is to connect council to what's already been considered, for the vision, to that draft MZO, get these comments, start getting comments like we've seen over the last week, and then proceed with the final draft of the MZO. So the proposed MZO process will help fundamentally establish the early phases of the orbit vision by allowing the planning to continue for the ultimate vision. So I do have a diagram lined up that will show, what the two key elements of that are. More importantly, and I want to put to rest, this idea that the orbit and the draft MZO has been cooked up in isolation. That's not the case. There has been a lengthy process to date that has guided the orbit principles and the vision documents. Those were affirmed as recently as July. And as you'll see in the draft MZO, a lot of time and effort, as recognized by some members of council and appreciated, has tried to translate that into the draft MZO that we see tonight. But by all means, it's not a perfect document, but we need a starting point to engage the public and to start getting some comments at some point. So, despite there not being a formal process under the Planning Act, the MZO isn't a widely used tool. That's not to say there hasn't been a formal process at all. This has been occurring through a public process, albeit that it may be sitting outside of the planning process. And this is where we start to see those two processes move together through the MZO. So the MZO isn't, being drafted in isolation of what we already heard through the public process. And I think it's important to remind ourselves of that. The other thing too, with respect to, whether it's the end of October or November or whatever that month looks like, if we do want more time, October 28th was looked at in terms of the runways associated with the end of the year, if we can believe that we're actually talking about that. So, there's various approval processes at the town and the county and the province that, without losing significant amounts of time, it would be prudent to move forward now. So that station cannot be is not delayed unnecessarily for the future. And that's what tonight is. Tonight was another step following up on the minister's letter that was submitted as part of the orbit vision back in November 2019 that was adopting and supporting transit-oriented communities. This continues to be reinforced through more recent provincial initiatives, such as building infrastructure and transit, and as the deputy mayor spoke to, affordable housing supply. COVID is only accelerating, the attention of the province to, to move the province economically forward as we hopefully move out of that COVID pandemic soon. And certainly the MZO is a very large factor in that recovery process, locally and regionally for that matter. Next slide, please, Patty. So why an MZO? And there's two questions in play. One is, I think, should we be using an MZO or not? And I think that's probably going to be the focus of council's discussion tonight. Knowing that whatever the outcome of that is, there will be time and energy to get into the details of that final draft. So, if the discussion tonight could focus on, do we use an MZO or not, knowing that staff's best interest and the community's best interest are to incorporate, details over the next few weeks, then we can certainly discuss the second question about the details of the final draft to the MZO. So this report identifies the MZO tool, but I want to make very clear, and for any provincial partners that are listening, we know that this is ultimately the call of the minister, and I think many of us realize that. The draft MZO tonight represents the town putting its best foot forward to start the discussion and to have the conversations that we're starting to have. So, getting back to the question of why, MZOs and their increased use, do have negative connotations, and they can be viewed as short-circuiting typical planning processes. The reality is that MZOs are sanctioned or recognized under the Planning Act, and they're being used by local and provincial governments who have been democratically elected. So, there are people elected to represent, ourselves that, are using a tool that's available legislatively for them. And that's part of the reason why we looked at this tool to help move forward tonight. If there are multiple planning approval pathways, then what's the best way to expeditiously implement that vision? And, as we've said in the report, the MZO tool jumpstarts that rail station, begins to implement the core of the orbit, that center of mass that we talk about. And more importantly, it sets that tone, for development that by its nature exceeds the planning horizons established by the Planning Act. So, as was talked about tonight, I think it was Ms. Malcolmson maybe that talked about this is a longer term plan. The idea of the orbit and the secondary plan process that follows it is to set that longer term tone, and give us some certainty as we make some decisions now to move forward. And we've heard, and let's not forget that for a developer to construct infrastructure, over a period that's going to take years, and in the amount of tens of millions of dollars, there needs to be some certainty. So, whereby a typical planning process for something of this size could easily take 5 to 7 years. The Friday Harbors, for those that can remember, took longer. It's going to be quite some time before a station will have that certainty to actually start construction. So, during that decade, dare I say it, for approvals and construction, we'll have lost, what that vision is trying to achieve as it's ground through a lengthy and expensive process, not only for the taxpayer, but for the developer. And in the meantime, and from a planning perspective, it's going to be another 10 years of same old development, potentially, as growth continues to occur in the region. So, if you want an example of looking at the effective time, a recent example was pointed out to me about the city of Vaughan. They had a population of 25,000 in 1980. As I understand it, and what I heard was, 40 years later, it's at about 320,000 people, with a lot of homogenous development in the meantime. So, and now we're trying to see a Vaughan that's trying to create a city center or a city core based around transit after the fact that not to use too many analogies, the growth train has already left the station, so to speak. So, in another 10 years, it will be essentially 25 years since the station was first proposed in the town of Innisfil. And in those next 10 years, the province sees the town growing by almost 20,000 people. So is there a better process to get ourselves moving in the right direction and start to implement, the growth vision that Orbit embodies? Next slide, please, Patty. And not to, similar to the Vaughan example, we've seen this slide in past presentations where Mississauga is a GTA example. Over 60 years, Mississauga went a lot looking like Innisfil does currently. with development along its lakeshore to a full build out. So when we talk about time and the need to responsibly, start to accommodate growth, there are certainly nearby examples in the GTA. Next slide, please, Patty. So, I want council to, I'd just like council to hear from me personally that, staff aren't taking this MZO process lightly. We are looking into a better process that balances competing community needs. So, on one hand, we have multiple hands here. We have 80% of residents that intend to use the station that, our survey data has shown. In 2019, Innisfil Transit provided 13,000 trips to the Barrie South GO station. Which shows there is a demand just through our transit system, let alone what people are driving to that station. On our other hands, we have the lake, the sustainability piece, and the environment, which are certainly top of mind, not only for residents but also for council. And we have housing supply that we've heard about tonight, both attainable and affordable, and that's an issue for many municipalities today. And the list goes on. So, what we've tried to do when we've been looking at the MZO as an option for us, is there a hybrid that we can include in the draft and the final draft, depending on what direction we get from council and the public, with input from the community agencies that will help, take away some of the negative stigma attached to MZOs in the past. And, this isn't an MZO that's typical. Councillor Van Berkel did point out the fact that, he hasn't seen others as big as this. There is a recent example in the town of Caledon that was for an area for approximately twice as large as our 425 meter radius, which I apologize, I haven't spoken to the slide yet, which is shown as the outer yellow circle in that diagram. So, in terms of land areas, certainly there are some examples out there that are bigger than others. But what this MZO does, and what we hope to have continuing discussions with the province about, is that it introduces the policy concepts, and commits developers to the principles and the visions that have been established, through that public process to date. So, I am pretty sure, we've been doing our research, I'm pretty sure you won't find another MZO that, that has, principles of development and actual visions attached to that document. We've included those to, connect, what that direction of the town has been so far to this first stage of the implementing tool. And part of that, we have had external and internal legal reviews for this to put us on the right path regarding the draft. And we look forward to advancing it further on that basis. Also, too, the other point of differentiation with this MZO is that typically where you have an MZO that comes in and it's issued, and it's, as the expression goes, done and dusted. The zoning is in place, development goes ahead. The form of development is established and starts to function. This MZO doesn't turn its back, on that immediate need. It also looks towards future planning processes and the need for those processes, particularly when it's, the size that's being proposed. The wider orbit area, which is shown as a black dash line on that diagram, which is essentially, the area that's more vivid in color. That is going to require more planning, and certainly those processes that we alluded to, that secondary plan process is a key part of that. So, looking at the slide and the graphic, the MZO is doing two things. The first one is that it's permitting an urban transit community and those land uses within that first 425 meter ring. So that outer yellow ring it's basically permitting uses to happen in there right away, subject to the site plan process, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So establishing that uses can go in there, and as a result, giving certainty to the developer that before they make those large infrastructure investments, that they do have a permitted land use that could be used within that 425 meter circle. And secondly, what it does is that that black line, and excuse the planning speak, but that orbit boundary, as we refer to as a major transit station area, gives some certainty for this council and for staff that when we start to make decisions that honestly exceed the 20 years of most planning horizon documents in the Planning Act, to give us some certainty about what we're planning to, and knowing that if growth is going to occur within a railway station, let's call that for what it is. There is growth, that is a form of growth that makes the most sense to make use of infrastructure and avoid sprawl. So what is that ultimate boundary so that we can plan for the longer term? And it's it's interesting to ask yourself if other municipalities had, in the GTA had planned out boundaries, looking 50 years ahead, if they might have turned out differently. And, I won't be able to tell that anytime soon, but certainly we're trying to be proactive in that regard. So the MZR is doing two things. It's just to recap and to be clear, because this is a key question. It's permitting land uses, with subsequent site plan approvals to occur within that 425-meter circle, that outer yellow circle. And then secondly, it's establishing that larger boundary around the outside, just the boundary, to tell us what the ultimate is when we're making significant decisions in the town. That gap in between, that outer yellow line and that outer black line in that picture, that's what the secondary plan process is to do. And, this MZO, unlike other MZOs, certainly refers to that secondary plan process. It doesn't permit, the MZO won't permit land uses beyond that 425-meter radius until, that longer and more fulsome secondary plan process is undertaken. And at the same time, too, it will allow us to look, if there's not development occurring to that full 425, during the, while that secondary plan process is taking place, there will be an opportunity there as well to look back and tweak that orbit vision within that 425, just to ensure that those elements that have been captured in the orbit principles aren't lost, to ensure that things like employment uses and technology and environment are occurring as intended. I also want to recognize that, there's no building permits being issued tomorrow. Many of us would like to think things happen that quickly, and in some cases, it's a nice thought, but in this case, as I mentioned, there's still a rigorous and detailed site plan process. So like any site plan process right now in the town, with whatever zoning you have, whether it's through the MZO or not, you still have to go through a site plan process. It does require detailed studies. It does require you to consider provincial policy like the Light Single Protection Plan. It does require you to stay out of areas of environmental sensitivity, that are defined through detailed studies. So that piece will still occur. And to the discussion tonight as well about enforcement, obviously we can enforce that like any other bylaw, and not only the bylaw, but also through the site plan compliance process as well, where there are development agreements in place to ensure that the development does occur as intended and as approved by council and staff. Next slide, please, Patty. So the next slide is, there's a lot of numbers on here, and I thank Communications for putting this together. So, another part of the hybrid model to try and shed some of the negative connotations of the MZO is trying to engage the community. So, how can the town not only inform the content of the MZO to better reflect the orbit, but also build in that community engagement, that may not be even baked into a traditional planning process. There's an argument to be made that, the orbit process to date, could exceed, other secondary plan processes, demonstrated by some of the numbers up here. So, we're doing it differently. We're not having, like I said before, there's things that are happening in the public realm, not necessarily under the Planning Act. And we're seeing that evidence in some of the numbers. And, since it's been in the public realm since last week, this draft report, we've seen very clearly that the public is engaged. And there's, to be honest, another 3 weeks to gather input. And certainly some of the key numbers in that slide, are the 2100 on the right hand side. There was an email blast that went out to directly to people who have expressed interest in the orbit, letting them know that this report was coming to council. And I suspect that led to a lot of the comments tonight. And then more vividly, I guess, is the fact that numbers like 51,000 video views on the left-hand side and 23,000 orbit webpage views, are testament that, this thing hasn't been happening by itself or happening in a back room. There is public interest out there, and we continue to see that. So, the Get Involved website was opened up back in December 2019. It's been gathering momentum since. And another part to talk about tonight too, which there may be a question about is, third-party appeals. They are, we're not going to shy away from the fact that they are absent from the MZO process. That's not to say though they're also absent from other planning processes, like the county growth plan and like settlement boundary expansion. So, there are planning processes that, don't rely on LPAT to be the preferred decision maker. We know there's municipalities across Ontario that have similar feelings. So we just want to be very clear about that, that, yes, while, there isn't that third party appeal process, that's not to mean that there's not a public engagement process that underpins this vision. And, and we talked about, the MZO being a tool, there will be trade-offs, and we are putting trust in, an elected minister to use his power appropriately. By no means is the MZO in its current draft form or in its final draft form, depending on what that public comments are, by no stretch is this a rubber stamp by the minister's office. The minister can amend that MZO, and very recently and locally, the minister has declined an MZO where it was felt that the public interest may not be served. So I just wanted to point that out through this slide, and speak to some of that discussion too about we can extend to November to get more comments from those 24 days that are currently being proposed. But if we do that, then there may be value in at least indicating council's desire to use the MZO, so that if there is less runway, quote unquote, for our county and provincial partners to help move this before the end of the year, that we can at least give them notice that something is coming, and the format of that and the content of that will be determined through our engagement process. Next slide, please, Patty. The next slides talk about some of the next three slides are going to show talk about some of the financial considerations of this. So we know there's an approximation of $29 million for a GO station. It does seem like a lot when I first saw that number, but if anyone knows infrastructure these days, that it doesn't go as far as it used to. That's for sure. So, in the past, provincial governments would have built that station, and ultimately, as we like to say, there's only one taxpayer, and that would have been passed on to us. Maybe shared over a greater population for sure, but ultimately the taxpayer would pay for that. The current model and why the MZO is being used, looked at in this particular case or considered for use is, if the developer is going to pay for the construction and pass that asset on to Metrolinx, then what assurances are there for the development community to make that investment? Next slide, please, Patty. And, the next two slides talk about the benefits. So, how does a developer benefit from building the GO station? There is obviously an increase of value of land surrounding that GO station. That's the fundamental basis of that transit-oriented community model. That is the way that the province feels that stations should be funded. At the same time, too, there's a high density residential area that's created, and obviously more units means more revenue. And then number three is, something that Metrolinx has been exploring more often recently, is using potential Metrolinx assets like air rights around the station. So, these are the reasons that, speak to the developer, wanting to contribute towards the cost of the GO station because of these potential benefits. Next slide, please, Penny. And then, the next slide, more importantly, is what does the community get? And we've heard some of that discussion tonight. We do get a higher quality station that anchors the community and supports placemaking rather than that cookie cutter model. Yes, we could put the cookie cutter model in, but, by the way, that cost is still in the order of $15 million. And is that really a throwaway cost that any taxpayer wants? And we have to ask ourselves that question. The financial burden of the station is not placed on the Innisfil taxpayers, but we receive the benefit of that, and those commuting will certainly receive the benefit of that. And then finally, the commitment to the orbit vision as well, that wider vision whereby we can entrench that and ignite these initial stages of development. So that concludes my overview. I'm sorry it went on so long, but this is a very complex topic, and it's generated certainly lots more discussions than the typical agenda item, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. And it was helpful because I'm sure a lot of people watching tonight have just been engaged in this. So that was probably the first time they'd ever heard of the background behind it. Now I'll go to questions of council, and thank you for your patience. Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you. Hard to follow up on that, but I have about 7 different questions. And so I'm going to get to the meaty ones in case I have to break and you're going to go to another councillor, if you allow me the latitude to come back. I just feel that they're questions that need to be answered and also help us to determine the direction. So the first one, Mr. Kane, you had mentioned about the MZO being complicated. And I think that's the perfect word. It's a tool that's very complicated for people to understand, and even counselors, I'll admit. We've had experience of using this in Tollendale, but that was supporting 2,000 seniors in housing. So just to clarify, with the MZO for the orbit, you're asking the MZO to be inclusive of the full orbit, the full picture to the wide scope, or are you using this MZO, I'm going to the American Z's, to just quantify the train station in a 420 meter corridor, but explaining the picture of the other. So maybe if you could, I don't know if I'm describing that right. It just, I think, helps people that, are we looking at, 150,000 people right now? Are we looking at the core? So if we could just start with that question, and my others will follow off of that one. Thank you. Do you want to answer or respond?
I do. I was just waiting to be invited by the chair. Sorry.
I'm sorry. We're in committee of the whole, so please we'll dispense that. Please answer.
Thank you, Worship, and through to Councillor Asadi. Ms. Tom, if you could go back to that slide that showed the radiuses, if that's showing on the screen, it might help explain my answer. That one there, thank you. So Councillor Asadi, yeah, as I mentioned, the MZO is basically concerned with two things. One is, permitting uses within that outer yellow circle, that 425 meter radius, as you mentioned. And secondly, establishing that longer term boundary that we can plan to on the outside. So, everything in between that outer yellow circle and the black line, the areas that are more vivid in color on that screen, for lack of a better description, that is the secondary plan area that will follow up and complement orbit in future. So yeah, long story short, the orbit will allow land uses within that outer yellow circle, establish that outer boundary, and then the secondary plan process will work within those parameters moving forward.
Okay, and I'll just go to some of my other questions, which may relate back to this, but in your the draft report, are the regulations carved in stone? So it says, so I'm just wondering, will council and the community have an opportunity for feedback, on the site plan, the regulations, stormwater, natural features? How does that come back to council? Typically it would be a developer coming and this is what we look at, and then we have all of our questions. Because I think council needs some flexibility to say, I'm not happy with the parking, or I have a concern with this. If you could address that one, please.
Certainly, Councillor Asadi. And there are a couple ways that council can input moving forward. One obviously is a secondary plan process where council will be adopting that and making a recommendation to the county. The second is the ability to amend the MZO like any other zoning instrument. Council has that ability to initiate zoning bylaw amendments, and we have housekeeping amendments. We have had those in the past, and then finally through the site plan approval process, at the staff level is that process can require and will require expert reports. So if there are matters such as parking or proximity to environmental features, those studies would form part and parcel of those site plan applications, to make sure that even though there are no minimum parking examples, for example, included in the MZO, that we do have qualified experts, to the satisfaction of town staff reviewing those applications, that, despite those specific numbers not being in there because of something, trying to throw a dart and figure out what that parking rate is now, we do have the ability to look at that specifically during that site plan process and require that number of parking spaces through that development agreement.
So then residents, the community and council would have an opportunity for input also in the phases 2 and 3 of this, as well as the initial yellow circle orbit.
Yeah, so the site plan processes within those yellow circles, again, that's another example of no third-party appeal rights, but those documents are in the public domain. Staff do consider any comments that are received during that when those applications are being reviewed.
And then I was going to ask about the report being pushed to November, and you did refer that that could happen. But what's the impact? I know you were trying to do a deadline of getting to the county in November, and I believe the minister in December. I kind of wonder how much a minister is going to be looking at something like this in a month of December. If it was pushed to November, then we're looking at December and January. Is that like?
Yeah, that's
after. I just feel that it gives more opportunity for our community for input. So I just looking at that direction.
Yes, no, thank you, Councillor Sutton. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but certainly council does have the discretion to, to dictate the timelines of this process. So, if there is more time involved, to get the details of that MZO in place, by all means, it's something that staff will reflect and work towards, even harder than what we're already proposing to do. What I do suggest, if I could, is that, if council, wants to allow extra time, for that to happen, given the amount of work involved, not only at the town, but also the county and province, certainly an initial position tonight, just to affirm that, an MZO, is intended to be used by the town, if that question can be answered tonight through this debate, would certainly be helpful to minimize that risk of delay, as I mentioned.
Yeah, and I don't think that there'd be, any point in going in that direction. Mm-hmm. If council's looking at something else. And what's the timeline difference? I think you spoke something about appeals to getting the transit station if we did not use the MZO. I've just written down all my questions, so I have to keep checking them off as I've done them.
No problem, Councillor. Yeah, I did touch on that in the presentation. So, if there was a contested, in other words, meaning, an appealed secondary plan process, associated with, the station in the center of Mass, you could be looking at particularly a complex project, rubbing the crystal ball here, you're looking at, potentially 5 to 7 years, for that to go through that process. So it is quite longer than what the MZO would allow in that immediate yellow circle. Knowing that the secondary plan process, would still be going ahead, and quite frankly, possibly taking that full 2 years or even longer, as I just suggested.
Okay. And then my last one, I'll let others speak after this. Is the developer, I mean, we're looking at to, expedite the transit station, GO station. Residents have asked for this for years. 80% of the population commutes to work. So, and councils before us, as you have mentioned, have been asking and begging for a GO station. So if we're going to all this work and we're using this tool of an MZO, is the developer ready to move forward on construction timeline for Metrolinx to start building, or is this going to sit on a shelf? Because if it's going to sit on a shelf and he's not ready to start this, then, what's the point of rushing this through?
Thank you, Councillor Sadie, and I couldn't agree with you more. So, if this is going to sit on the shelf, then there is no point. But, the regular touch points that we have, with that station design team, with our provincial partners, with the county, at no point has there been, an alternative time frame other than us trying to start construction by 2022. So, for that to happen, things, have to start happening sooner rather than later. If that's not going to happen, because of other needs of the developer, then certainly I would expect those to be communicated before we got to this point, and before we got this far. So as far as I'm concerned, and based on the best available information that I'm hearing on a regular basis, we're still moving towards a potential start date of 2022.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Your Worship, and other councillors for giving me that airtime.
Thank you. I think Mr. Kane was being very generous when he said 5 to 7 years. How long were we in OPA 1, Mr. Kane?
Yes, Your Worship. I tend to be a little too optimistic sometimes, but yes, OPA 1, was probably being discussed around the same time as that first Go Station EA back in, around 2005. So yes, long processes that, at the end of the day, I'm not sure best serve the community.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks very much for the presentation, Tim. That was a good overview and give some people some background information that this is a town-led initiative. This isn't a developer-led initiative. We're trying to work with a developer who is interested in moving this forward, but he needs some financial assurances. However, the orbit is a way of development for the future. There's no doubt about that. We're light years ahead of what Bradford's doing and what Barrie's doing, and they may not see this as necessary in Innisfil, but I certainly think it sets a trend for other municipalities to show, that we're really thinking light years ahead in terms of the importance of sustainability, importance of climate change, because this development addresses all those. However, Claire did mention that there is really no teeth in any of this that I can see. Normally, the teeth would be behind the secondary plan, which only in this case is for the outer ring. It doesn't account for what's going to happen in the GO station, the secondary ring or the third ring. And so this is where my issue really is. We're creating a bit of a donut, not an orbit. Is that the donut is nice and chewy. It has all those wonderful things we want to have in it because there's going to be a secondary plan, but there's no secondary plan for what's going to start now. And the secondary plan is what gives us the principles, the policies, and the teeth behind getting the developer to do what we want them to do. So my concern, and I think a lot of others in the environment will, if something goes wrong in that first in the first part where the developer doesn't meet the sustainability goals or a lot of the things that we're looking for, then we have a rotten core, and I can't see anything happening good beyond that. So what I'm looking for, and I think what other people are looking for, what assurances do we have that the MZO will have some teeth behind it, that we can guarantee that this is, that the core meets a minimum of LEED Platinum, and that the next ring is passive, and we go beyond that in terms of all the environmental concerns we want to see happen in this core. So and some of the other things, as mentioned by Councillor Asadi, is transparency. In terms of making sure this is in the public realm all the time, that we're not going to skip the transparent piece, making sure people know what's going on, but also the whole public consultation in terms of what points do they have an opportunity to see what's going on. In the MZO, it does say, that we'll look back. We can all amend the MZO based on what happens in the, later years. But my concern is that knowing developers and knowing that Quartel hasn't really done a truly sustainable development is whether or not we're going to be able to get this done at the core, because everything radiates from that core. If that falters, then the rest of the plan falls apart, and it will mean nothing. It won't be innovative, and other communities says, well, there's Innisfil, they tried something, they didn't have enough teeth in it, and it didn't work. So I want this to be a glowing example of what's possible and what positive impacts that we can have as a council and as a community on what future growth looks like. And so I need to have more teeth in the MZO to ensure, make me feel comfortable, and let some of the people that I've talked to feel more comfortable that we're not going to lose control of this. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Waters. Mr. Kane.
Yes, and through your worship to Councillor Waters, thank you. I agree with you. If the whole point of the GO station at Center Mass is to be that ignition factor and to keep that, to start that momentum to do something truly different here. And, if we don't do that, then it fails. And for that reason, we have included in the draft MZO, certainly steps that we think, helps provide that certainty. But by all means, if there are, more specific matters that, we can include between now and that final draft, by all means, we're all ears. But, in the meantime, another differentiating factor with this MZO is a reliance on a master site plan that does speak to the orbit principles and the orbit visions attached. So it's a little bit more than just a pretty picture now that is being included in that MZO. And in fact, there is authority under Section 41, and I don't want to get too technical, but Section 47 of the Planning Act that allows us to mandate sustainability principles, and we feel that the way that they've been included and outlined in the MZO draft, does allow us to do that. And if we can bolster that more, through consultation with yourself and other experts, to do that further for that final MZO draft, then we're more than happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make a comment that is that one of my other concerns is that if we have to wait 5 to 7 years, if we don't use the MZO and we have to wait 5 to 7 years or longer, is that this community will become just another community. We will continue the urban sprawl, the single family housing, and not reach the density targets we need to make communities more sustainable. So I'm seeing both sides of this argument in terms of we need the MZO to move this thing fast enough that we can get the project started and work on those sustainability issues as we move through it, but having enough teeth to allow us to guarantee the builder will do that. Because my concern is that if we don't go fast enough, we wait 5 to 7 years, this will just be more urban sprawl like we see happening in Barrie and everywhere else. And I think we have an opportunity. The window is relatively small, and we have a developer based on densities will start giving us a GO station that is unlike any other GO station in Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions or comments from Council? Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. I did have a couple of questions, but I believe Councillor Rosati had those answered for me. So just a couple of comments, if I might. Obviously, tonight we're just receiving this and considering additional public comments over the next few weeks. Well, I wonder if staff are to be reviewing all the comments that we received or just those ones from the actual residents. The council obviously has received so many cut and paste emails on this item that I've ever seen before. And sadly, it seems that so many of them were non-residents just suggesting that we should not bow to a developer's wants to ruin the environment and the planning process. Sadly, although many of these people took the time to forward a chain letter, apparently none of them took the time to actually research what is really going on here. They didn't acknowledge that the time and town planning that has gone in, or the actual local resident engagement that has occurred to this point. This is the town's vision that a developer is agreeing to bring to light against just doing approved residential development. For Innisfil to accommodate at least the first 20,000 or so new residents coming as allocated by the province and the county, Innisfil has found an amazing solution to do that ideally without ruining the essence of this town and our natural environment, while ensuring that we establish and design a transit hub to responsibly absorb, service, and find mobility for the upcoming onslaught. I remember back my first few months when I was elected in 2014, we were in a strategic planning meeting tasked with planning the infrastructure to accommodate the growth that was coming. Ever since then, we've been looking how to preserve the reasons we all love Innisfil, including those of us who weren't born here, but moved here because of what we love in this town. And we had to absorb what was coming. With innovative solutions and really without detrimentally impacting Innisfil, our staff and artisans envisioned the orbit concept, which with input from the entire committee is now coming to life to absorb that kind of growth, combined with accessibility to get in and out of Innisfil without ruining the rest of what we all love. This orbit has been publicly publicized nationally and has been hailed as a great solution in a 425-meter radius to absorb growth responsibly without detriment to the community. Personally, I was only called by one actual resident who expressed their concerns, but although apprehensive in thinking this was giving the development community power, they admitted that they really hadn't been following the process of the orbit, but understood the justification of this years-long plan and the need to expedite our vision for our mobility hub and to get our GO station functional by 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I got lobbied more with the casino than I did with this. I'm just saying, but that was probably my number of more letters for the casino. Other questions or comments, Council? Councillor Feller.
Yes, I've been listening to everybody's comments. It's nice to see that majority of council are on the same page with regards to this. There are a few things that keep on coming up that I need some clarification on. Initially, the 225 meter radius, we're looking at an area that's approximately 600 feet square, 200 by 200 meters for the GO station and the initial. Now, the additional up to the 425, am I understanding that this is in support? It's to offer incentive for people to build or move in around the GO station itself? And the second question I have is this 5 to 7 years keeps coming up. I don't understand. Can you explain to me, because if I don't understand, I have the documentation and I can't fathom this. How does a 2-year project turn into 7 years by removing the MZO and then, you know, having public consultation? We were put in this office to be the voice of the people, and they're coming to us and we can't provide the answers that they're asking. How are we supposed to garner their respect and support if we can't provide them with information that we don't understand ourselves?
Sure. Well, staff are available all the time. If you send them an email, they'll be happy to do that. I'm going to give a stab at this answer. It won't be a planning answer. It'll be a political answer, but I'm going to give a stab at it, and then I'll pass it off to the professionals. So let's say we say no MZO. So we go to an official plan amendment, and we always get an appeal to the official plan amendment. So that appeal there might be, I'm just guessing based on other OP reviews and OP appeals. So the first one might be, Mr. X, who has land over on the 5th line. And he's like, yeah, I'm appealing this because I've got land and I want to grow houses on my land. And so I don't want you to have all this growth in one area. I want you to spread it around. So then either we go to a full LPAT hearing, or what normally ends up happening, and Councillor Van Berk will back me up on this, is we end up compromising. We end up coming with minutes of settlement for something. So this guy gets his 200 units and he withdraws his appeal. And then you get appeal from developer X, who's over here, and I got land and it's next to a settlement area and I should be able to develop that. And it just erodes, and it ends up, with case management cases, and then settlements, and then somebody else appeals it. And the people who appeal it typically are not, for the most part, residents. It's mostly other developers who all want their land to be the most valuable land, which is why you end up with patches here and patches here and patches here, instead of more compact development. But that's my take, but I'll go to Mr. Kane now, and he can correct me or fill in the blanks.
Thank you, Worship. And yeah, we've all seen those planning processes you describe, and they're typically frustrating for all parties involved. In the 5 to 7 year window, Councillor Fowler, that is a best guess, if you want to call it that. It can be less in a very smooth, uncontested process, and it can be certainly more in a highly contested process, that we've seen locally and in the county in the past. So, and it's not just a secondary plan process. It's the rezoning process that stems from that. It's the appeals, and the various facets of the appeals, and it's site plan as well. So all those things contribute to a longer process. And 5 to 7 years is us trying to be a little optimistic, obviously, but also being grounded by the reality of past experience with more complex planning applications. With respect to the second question about the 425 meters, that area basically, from what I understand, equates to about 56 hectares. So, in that 56 hectares, and as outlined in the report, that can potentially accommodate 7,000 units or 21,000 people, over those early phases of development. So, the idea is, when you have expensive infrastructure and an expensive GO station, how do you recoup that investment? And you do that by spreading it over more units, to the point that, you know, it can be absorbed in that land lift value and absorbed in the price of those units without being prohibitive for those people buying units in there, and not undermining, you know, what the Orbit's trying to achieve, you know, in the meantime with respect to affordable and attainable housing. So, and also too, sorry, going back to my previous comment about the 5 to 7 years, you know, those county processes involved in there too, which, you know, we have less control over as well, that, you know, are related to things like growth and settlement boundary expansions, and, you know, in those wider conversations countywide that happen among 16 municipalities, not just Innisfil. So, thank you.
One follow-up possible. Okay, thank you for the answers. Very informative. I appreciate it. With a 2-week window, there's been many comments from other councillors as well that this isn't sufficient time to have any sort of public input. I support them in getting as much public engagement as possible moving forward with this, because if we can do this and get everybody rowing in the same direction, or even at least if we're not, they understand that their voices, concerns, and thoughts have been heard and validated. If we can do that, I think that may, no matter what we decide over the grand scheme of things, will make it for a smoother transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other, Mr. Keogh, and then Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Fowler and the rest of Council, just because there has been a lot of discussion about engagement, but we are pulling out a lot of the stops for this one. You know, a large part of why you have been getting emails has become because we have been driving a lot of communications about this. You know, a friendly reminder that in tomorrow's newspaper, there is a full page ad about this project, about this initiative, and also an invitation basically to the public to something we haven't done before, which is basically an Ask a Planner YouTube night that we're having on Monday. Just speaking to some of those concerns that Councillor Fowler raised about not having those questions. You know, we're going to go out there quite publicly, invite people to come on in and ask us those questions, basically get into those good conversations, and collect some of those themes and pieces to basically include in that staff report. So you will see a lot of what is happening in the community, a lot of the questions being raised, and we'll be addressing those for you. So we really are just doing everything we can to make sure we've got, you know, everything out there to have that important conversation.
Thank you very much for that. And for those who are watching and for council, poor Councillor Payne got kicked off and frozen off, and she's trying to get back on. So I've just sent a message to staff to try to help her get back in the meeting. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. This has been a great discussion this evening. I came into this meeting with a bit of intrepidation about all the emails that we received and the responsibility of this council to do the right things for Innisfil. So as we talk about it, it's been brought up by other councillors very well. Like this is not developer driven. This is our vision for the future of Innisfil. And I went back used the mayor's suggestion to review that November meeting where we had the first unveiling of this vision, and the title on it said, you know, Rural Reimagined. And for me, being the councillor for one of the more rural wards, I took that very positively, and this is a way that we can preserve the character of our community, of our smaller communities, that, you know, the Strouds, the Churchills, the Lefroys, all the other villages that we cherish. You know, it's an answer to the sprawl that we know isn't the way of the future. So this is a good thing that we're proposing. And for all those people that have questions, you know, we can just give them the link to this meeting, and I'm after this discussion, I'm pretty confident that their questions will be answered. So I did have, as Tim went through this draft that we're going to support, I do have to say to council that I do have a bit of a conflict of interest with as the way the map sits right there. The outer perimeter does go through some land that my family owns. So I will be declaring that conflict, and I will be stepping aside and not voting. But I wanted to at least have those comments from someone who was born here and works here and farms here. So those are my comments, and I look forward to hearing the rest of this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I concur kind of with Councillor Water was speaking about putting some teeth, and I was looking here at the orbit vision plans, and prior to that, what it actually, let me just get it back up here, how it's implemented, supposedly the orbit principle shall mean, are those plans, oh, no, I lost it again. Are those plans, what's the word? Embedded in the agreement? Will they be embedded in the agreement that when the developer builds or developers, that they will follow the orbit principles? Is that concrete in the agreement? That's my first part I'm concerned about, because there's no point getting it going and getting an MZO done and then we get this disaster down the road. And I don't want to see that of looking like our neighbors or whatever. Councillor Ices, I respect your view. Being in the agricultural business, you know it more than probably a lot of us. And your view really speaks for the farmers in the area, the rural area. And seeing that you're comfortable with this, I think gives me some comfort. I just need one small, I've been listening and listening. I don't, maybe it's just my head tonight, I'm tired. The MZO is for the circled area out to 425 meters. The green area is the secondary plan. Is it possible, and if I'm right, and if I'm wrong, is it possible to get the MZO just for the 425 meters? Thank you. Mr.
Kane?
Yeah, so a couple of questions in there that I'll talk about. I'll start with the most recent one. The diagram that I think council can still see on the screen in the public. You know, the MZO is concerned, you know, only allows land use permissions within that outer yellow circle out to 425 meters. Beyond that yellow circle, we'll have to wait for that secondary plan process to catch up. The other part of what the MZO does, though, to Deputy Mayor Davison, just to clarify, you know, it does establish what that outer boundary is as well. So, you know, it's saying what that ultimate boundary of orbit should be, you know, i.e. a major transit station area, to give us something to plan. You know, it puts some parameters on the secondary plan process, and certainly for infrastructure investments as well that look beyond the typical planning horizon. So, yeah, just to recap, the MZO is only allowing land use permissions within that outer yellow line. And, you know, telling us what that ultimate boundary is so that we can plan to it more effectively in the future.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
So that I am correct, the MZO is within the 425 meters. So to concur with Councillor Waters and help him out there, in that MZO, will the orbit vision plans be embedded into the agreement in a concrete form that those conditions will be met, that makes this a unique community different from everybody else?
Mr. Kane?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor Davison, the short answer is yes. So, and it will happen incrementally. So, you know, what will happen is that, you know, there'll be a master site plan, approval process first. You know, they'll be looking at road patterns and lots, you know, to be laid out for development consistent with that orbit vision, that we'll be looking at the principles and those plans that are attached to the MZO. So that'll be the first instance where we start to embed those principles in vision documents. And then the second point will be, during the actual site plan approval process, and this is where we talk about and think about more tangible sustainability pieces where we can add them in. But when we're reviewing those site plans, through the scope that's defined in the Planning Act, we are going to be reviewing them for things like sustainability and transportation and all those matters. So, when we're doing that, those orbit principles again that are in the MZO and technically part of the zoning will form part of that. And finally, to your point, are they attached to the actual agreement? The orbit principles aren't, because they're already in that background of the MZO. But what is attached to that agreement are the drawings that staff would have already considered to be consistent with those orbit principles. So once those drawings form part of the agreement, the site plan agreement, development agreement, those drawings won't get attached unless staff are satisfied that those orbit principles that we've clearly defined and may define further have been embedded in those drawings that do get attached to that final agreement.
And a follow up, Your Worship. And then on page 18 of 26, where it speaks on different things that will be there regarding the environment, ecosystems, all the way through. And that last paragraph for affordable and attainable housing, will those, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, it's about 12 recommendations there. Will they be embedded and will they be adhered to with the MZO when the developer goes to build? And that is the third party not-for-profit organization that I'm really interested in.
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor Davison, again, the short answer is yes. So, earlier in that MZO document, you will see a minimum requirement that 10% of the units in there be affordable housing, and that's defined. That's a defined term in that document. One of those models is the one that you pointed out as the last bullet point in Appendix A to that report. So, yes, there will be a minimum requirement for affordable attainable housing. The model that's described in there is one model, but that's not to say that other models can't be put into use. And we've had discussions already with the county about what those might look like.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Your Worship. A hypothetical question to Mr. Kane is that I understand that the builders only have to build to the Ontario Building Code, and that usually anything beyond that is things that we can suggest, but they don't have to do. Can this builder say that I really legally only have to do to the Ontario Building Code, and then takes us to LPAT saying that this is what I'm planning to do. I'm going to meet the Ontario Building Code, but I don't want to do all this other stuff. Is that a possibility?
Mr. Kane?
Through to Councillor Waters, and I'm looking at the icon of our CBO as well to help us out in that regard. So, alternative code is a possibility. I can let Barry speak to that. Sorry, Councillor Waters, do you mind just rephrasing that question for me one more time?
I guess my understanding is that builders have to build to the Ontario Building Code, and that anything beyond that come from municipalities are only suggestions, and they can embed them. If there's incentives for them to do them, they can do them. So my question would be, is that on their submissions in terms of their plans, can they just say we're going to build to the Ontario Building Code? If we say no, we want more than that, can they just go to LPAT and argue that case? Thank you.
Mr. Vickers, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Waters. LPAT won't be ruling on the applicability of the building code. That would be the Building Code Commission. But staff are working actively. We have a committee that's meeting at least weekly. And so we are working on policies and strategies to include the sustainability, not just of the building, but of the economic viability, the cultural viability, and the environmental viability of the whole concept of sustainability. So we're actively working on how do we incorporate those incentives. So they're not just options. This is the vision that we want, and this is how we're going to achieve it. So we're still in the early stages of doing that, but that is really, really what we're gunning for. So, you know, the dirty little answer to your question is the builder just needs to follow the building code. But we are strategizing. So, and we're doing that collectively with the developer. So it's to their market advantage to go along with these concepts. We're not just doing this to try and force the developer to do this where we want this. We're trying to go collectively together towards a community that we can all be proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Brickers. And can I just add to that too, Councillor Waters? This just occurred to me is that we're signing an agreement with the developer to jointly use the same consultant. So it's not us saying you have to do that and them fighting back with us. It'll be that consultant will be accountable to both bodies.
Okay, that's kind of what I was hoping to hear. But at the same time, is that that builders always respond to making more money, and that we can always build density into a way of leveraging them to do these types of things that we want. So I just wanted to put that, I guess, proposal out there in terms of what could happen, and I wanted to hear a positive answer back, which I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, there will be site plan agreements all the way through this process. So that will be inclusive of, affordable housing and all of those kinds of social and environmental issues that are of value to us. We will, staff, with your direction, will certainly be including positive response to all of those kinds of objectives that we all share.
Mr. Kane.
And just to add that too, and to make, I think, the CBO's life a little easier, the MZO, like any other zoning bylaw, is applicable law under the building code. So, if, in reviewing that building permit, if they don't see compliance, with that zoning bylaw, including the orbit principles that are being included in there now, there is a call that can be made about whether or not that, issuance that building permit is following those principles in that document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. And my apologies, I got booted out of Zoom. It took me a while to find my way back, but I did.
I told everybody. I told everybody that.
Okay. Thank you for the orbit draft. I still have different feelings on this one. I think that if we had a more realistic vision of what it's going to look like, as opposed to space type thing, I think the residents would have taken to it a little better. I know that the GO station is going to go first, and then the first ring, is that going to be apartment buildings, all apartments, or is it going to be apartments, homes, townhouses? Is it going to be a mix?
Mr. Kane?
I'm just not sure of what the plan of the housing will be. I just have, if you could answer that question. Please.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Payne. I'm not sure if Ms. Tama is still on the controls there for the slide deck, but if she could go to the third slide, which does show one of those pictures you described, Councillor Payne, that might help with my answer a little bit. So, in that first 125 meters, what you're seeing here, and this has been put together, with the development and the design team. This is what you'll see. So yes, multi-story, are the primary anchors in this area, and you can see that with those taller buildings. But if you look more closely at the lower levels there, and what the MZO is capturing it is, there's, what we really want to do there is to have flexible spaces and have active uses, in those locations that, best serve that plaza area. So the first 125 meters is to anchor the orbit, to set the tone, and to be that, that ongoing center of attraction for the wide development as it takes place. Live work units are also proposed in here as well. And then as you go out, from that initial 125, you start to get into different built forms, including some townhouses, more opportunities for live work units, perimeter type buildings, with courtyards that, foster senses of neighborhood and community. It's that ripple effect that we've talked about for some time about, igniting the middle with, with those uses that the orbit needs for the longer term. And to Councillor Waters' point, getting it right at the beginning and setting the stage so we're not forgetting something later. And then, allowing those other uses to complement the orbit as they go to those other rings proposed in the MZO.
Thank you. I like the fact. Sorry, I like the fact that the higher buildings are going to be in the core area, and I just I would prefer to see more apartment buildings instead of having the urban sprawl, like you're getting in Barrie. Like there's houses and houses being put everywhere, and that's all you're going to see. So I think we need to be a little different here and go ahead with something like this. It's just different, and I think it's going to take a while for everybody to get used to the idea. And obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same as this, I hope, but I can see it getting that way. We'll take it as it comes, and we'll see what happens. That's all I can say.
Thanks, Councillor Payne. Councillor Sadi, and then Councillor Van Berkel.
Sorry, trying to work the two screens. Councillor Payne, I know I've said the same thing to residents. I age myself. Yes, it looks like, the Jetsons TV set or a Star Wars, vision, but there is examples of this that they use in Israel, in Paris, in the United Kingdom. Yes, it's not exactly like this. It's a concept, and concepts change. The design isn't exactly like that. So it's a vision that it's not the cookie cutter, it's not the townhouses that create the urban sprawl, but to go up so we can provide the affordability. And for those people that can't afford to buy a house, they need to be able to get their first foot in the door in some type of home, whether that's affordable, low income level to get in the door, or a small unit. The one thing I wanted to, it sounds like we're hearing a lot of comments in the report, and I know Mr. Kane, you had referred to this, that because this report in the recommendation is about council supporting the proposed delivery of the orbit vision. So if we're going to go and come back on the 28th of October, but I think that there seems to be, I'm just going to say, if there is an appetite, a hopefully supportive council for this, that if we extend that, I was just looking at the calendar to November 11th, or it gives a little bit more time for those groups to be able to put a presentation together to share their thoughts. When we heard the presentation by Mr. Kirschenblatt, who referred to our MPP Andrea Kanjan, with him stating that the MZO would not happen without widespread community involvement. I don't know, without speaking to her, where that is, but it's not a lot of time, but 2 weeks is a little tight. But that would just, I'm just wondering whether if we take it to November 11th, it just gives that little bit longer to come back, and I don't think that it would have an impact. That's just my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if if it doesn't, then it won't get approved. So there won't be a problem. So Mr. Rayner, did you have a comment?
Thanks, Your Worship. Members of council, just wanted to talk timing. So we understand that the county's planning committee is meeting on November 10th. So that would be the normal course for something like this would be to go to the county planning committee on November 10th and then proceed to county council the week, and Tim will have to help me, about 2 weeks later, I think, around the 20th.
November 24th.
24th, thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
You know, we might miss the planning committee meeting if you went to the 11th, but we could go to the 4th. We've got a special planning meeting booked already for November 4th, so that would give at least one more week. Certainly happy to accommodate that, whatever council decides. But I think, Councillor Sadi, just to underline, I think you're saying, just so that we're clear, that what council could provide tonight, if there's a willingness of council, is that there will be an MZO requested. That's the process, the pathway we're going down, the details of which will follow. That kind of indication tonight will be very clear, as Mr. Kane has indicated, because it allows county staff to prepare their report, because of course these things don't just appear on county council, they have to come with a county report. It allows MMAH staff to prepare for their submission to the minister so that he's briefed and ready. You know, there's a lot of pieces that go with this if we are going down the MZO process. And I think, you know, with a council resolution tonight that indicates that's the case, the mayor will be able to write the minister to indicate, you know, that an MZO is being requested, details of which will follow and be discussed between staff after the comments come in from the public. I think that would be an acceptable process for all of the stakeholders involved.
And just follow up, Your Worship, with Mr. Rayner and Mr. Kane. That also allows the comments from council to be considered in that report back, so that you can address some of those concerns as well. Thank you.
Yeah, like almost like a bookmark, like here, this is our intention, but we're still working out the details. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. My comments were going to be along the same line as Councillor Sadi's, that I would like to see at least a 2-week extension on the input from the public. Anyway, that's been discussed. The other thing I was going to ask Tim, what's the highest building you're going to put in? How many stories? Has there been anything determined, or?
Mr. Kane?
Through your worship to Councilor Van Berkel, the heights proposed are those showing in the vision now. So I'm not going to be able to count quick enough on screen. Certainly we're not looking for hyper density. We're looking for a livable density or a softer density. So yes, having these higher buildings as shown in that center core, but certainly dropping down beyond that to be more reflective and more in line with that vision. Because we've had numerous discussions. I think council's heard that before. Is that we can achieve quite high densities like they do in other great cities of the world like Barcelona, with 4- and 5-story built forms, and that's what we're focused on for those rings outside of this 125 meters shown on the image in front of you.
So the building that I'm looking at right now is what, 20 stories?
I think that's approximately correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Then I had Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I concur with Councillor Sadi that the other 2 weeks, I think, would give public input a lot more time. They've been brought up to speed. Now, I have a question that I keep getting an email from tonight. Is that ring that goes out into that Lake Simcoe in the orbit when you have your circles? I've been asked if that's a slingshot to send boats over to Keswick into the east there. Mr.
Kane?
Through to Deputy Mayor Davidson, I wish it was something that exciting. What that ring or slingshot as it's being described is a potential floating walking path. So again, looking 50 years into the future, what are those types of things that where we have many more people wanting to access the water, is there a way to better connect over to the water? So that's one idea that was being proposed in the vision. You'll notice that it is sitting outside that orbit boundary. But again, there's parts of this where we don't want to limit ourselves and dream about how we might be able to do things better in the future. And that's certainly a discussion point that's raised itself during the visioning process.
Working for my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. Just following up on Councillor Asadi's suggestion or thought that maybe pushing it to the November 4th date to provide that extra time for the residents to speak on this, or to at least add some comments to that. I know that Mr. Kane did send us another document saying that if council was generally supportive of the MZO, that perhaps we could add one further clause just to give staff that power to, or that ability to start moving forward and to bring this going. So maybe there may be some sort of amendment. I don't know whether with report back on November 4th and add that third clause in to give staff the ability to start moving forward to that date. I don't know whether I need to do this amendment. I know that Deputy Mayor has some amendment that you want to put in, but I think it was covered in the report already. But perhaps there's a seconder to get that third amendment on the table and then and add the November 4th date as well. If I could find a seconder.
Deputy Mayor Davidson is the seconder. Okay, we've had really good conversation. I just want to add just a couple of quick points. So, there was a comment earlier about why don't we just lobby for a small GO train station, and certainly that's what we had been doing for the last 20 some odd years. And we finally, through Minister Del Duca, when he was the Minister of Transportation in the last government, in the Liberal government, he did approve our little GO train station. And we were so excited. We were finally getting a GO train station after decades of lobbying. And we were part of a group of, I think it was 5 or 6 stations that were all going to be kind of design built, look the same. And we put them, we wanted ours to have 2 entrances, one on the 20th and one on the 6th. And we weren't going to be able to have that because it had to be the same as everybody else's. And but at the time, that was all we could get, and we were happy to get it. But when I look at that picture of that GO train station, and then picture in my mind, because I do take the train take the train from time to time. So I'm coming north, the station at Maple. When you get to Maple, there's a lineup of 10 people at the door. As soon as the door opens, everybody runs. It's every man for himself. There's elbows out and they're tearing across, because if they're first in their car and first at that light to get out on that busy road, it's another 25 minutes for their commute, because they have to sit through about 12 cycles of lights before all the cars shoo out of there. And then if you look at the design of East Gwillimbury, or the 2 newer ones, so East Gwillimbury and the South Mapleview, and there is no way, if you don't drive a car, that you're getting to that station, unless you're a marathon runner. Like, you cannot walk from that station to the nearest property anywhere. And when I look at that station, and when you leave Bradford and you pull into that station, I mean, it is a game changer. It is a game changer for our municipality. And the only way now that the government changed the rules, and rightly, I think, because the old way of doing it, and this is just my take on it, nobody at the province has told me this, but when the province decided they were building that station in Mapleview, on Mapleview and Yonge, those developers hit the jackpot. Every piece of land they owned there, like, quadrupled in value overnight. And we paid for the GO train station, we as all of the taxpayers in the province. So I think what the province is saying now is, why should the taxpayer be paying for a GO train station when the developer is going to reap all the benefits? We've been getting emails the last 2 days saying about lining our pockets, or developers lining their pockets. They were lining their pockets with the way that the process was then. Now what they're saying is, if you want that land lift, and if you want that land to be more valued, and you want that density, you pay the 25 million for the GO train station. So that is in essence, and we talked earlier about what would do, how that a vision would erode if it went over a 5 to 7 year process. And then my final comment was about the density and about Mr. Kay mentioned earlier. People are shock and awe when you say 150,000 people, and we're not talking about tomorrow. And I think it was Claire who said that, we have a commitment to the future, and that's what this is, because we've seen it. It's not like we can sit here and like duck our head and hope the growth doesn't find us, and that we're going to, somehow remain rural and everybody else is going to grow. We've seen what's happened south of us, and we've watched what happens when councils do things the way they've always done them. And I'm not being critical, because God knows, I have the world of respect for Hazel McCallion, but that's the way things grew back then. They grew everybody wanted a single family house with a big front lawn. And we just can't afford to sustain that infrastructure. And the other thing that's really important to our residents is keeping their existing neighborhood, keeping some farms, keeping local food. So if we can find a way to absorb the growth that we know is coming, just like it did in Vaughan and Mississauga, then we have an opportunity to keep the rest of Innisfil, which is what we love. And you and I know from council public meetings, I've been doing them for 26 years, you could put, when we did the Sleeping Lion, the very first development there, we had a public meeting. It was like, I forget how many units. It was like several hundred units. I think there was 1 or 2 people showed up at the public meeting because nobody backed onto it. We put 8 units on a street with houses surrounding it, and we have to lift the wall at the council chambers because we can't fit the number of people in there that are upset about it. So if it helps us keep the 8 units out of people's backyard to be able to create a vision that and keep people in our community, because we can't, like, if you don't want a single family house, or if you don't want a townhouse, you cannot live in this town. You've got to go somewhere else. So I really think that we are thinking of the future. The one comment I'll leave you with, because I've gone on long enough, is a few comments that I got on the when I poked the copy and send email was, well, I don't want it. Why don't you want it? Well, because my street is got potholes, or I don't want it because whatever, there's no, my part of the town doesn't have any street lights. So one of the comments that I did get was that don't let this become Innisfil's pet project at the expense of the rest of us, and forget about the rest of us. So I'd leave that comment with you, that part of the reason that I was getting some pushback was because of that. We said in our strategic plan that we are aware of the threat of sprawl and that we are committed to doing better. And I believe this is the antidote of sprawl and end the obligation for our future residents. Councillor Van Berkel.
I'd like to call for a recorded vote on this, Your Honor.
Thank you. So before we call the vote, I just want to make sure nobody has questions with the resolution as it stands on the screen. Mr. Parkin.
Your Worship, you'll notice that we've added, we've made a revised recommendation as opposed to you going through and each moving these. So if you do want to split it out, let us know, but we've just combined everything into one for ease of council's deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. Is there anyone who would like any of those 4 bullets split out from this resolution? Seeing none, there's been a recorded vote called, Mr. Parkin.
Thank you so much. I've got the recorded vote sheet here, and the order of the names is randomized. So when I call your name, if you could say yay or nay to this motion, and we'll start with Councillor Waters.
Yay.
Deputy Mayor Davidson. It's a yes. Councillor Van Berkel.
We didn't hear you,
You
Councillor.
were on mute there.
Oh, I'm sorry, against?
Against? Okay. Councillor Ices has declared a conflict. Councillor Fowler.
Nay.
Mayor Dolan.
In favor.
Councillor Payne.
In favor.
Councillor Orsatti.
In favor.
And Councillor Nicol.
In favor.
So that's 6 in favor, 2 against, and that motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, much appreciated. Next on our item, does everybody ready to keep going, or do we need a break? Are we good? Not seeing any be run, so we'll keep going. So next was Deputy Mayor Davidson, no, sorry, Councillor Orsatti, who pulled item C.2.
Thank you. I need a seconder. It's just in regards to, thank you, Councillor Rubnickel. Just give me a second to just switch. Okay, a couple questions that I have in regards to the report is just asking, there was a note in here about injury in remote work locations. Is the town covering accident injury when staff are working remotely at home is my first question.
Ms. Pegg, are you on the? Or what member of staff would be?
That was actually our CAO.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I see it now. And Ms. Pegg's here.
Yes.
Director Pegg?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Orsatti. And I welcome our lawyer, Mr. Parkin, to jump in at any point as well regarding WSIB. So employees working from home are covered by WSIB. That said, it would be a case-by-case analysis in terms of the incident that took place. So for example, if I was walking to my kitchen and tripped on a skateboard, that would likely not be covered under WSIB. But if I did not have an adequate workstation set up, that could be. That said, staff are working with employees to ensure that they do have adequate resources in place for MSDs. But I guess the short answer is yes, WSIB does apply, but it is a case-by-case assessment.
Thank you. And I'll continue with a couple of my other questions. The second one is with employees working remotely, is there increased IT costs for equipment to support the staff for this?
Ms. Pegg?
Sorry, go ahead.
I guess it looks like we have Mr. Kenny.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. So just wondering if you could rephrase the question again, as I was just getting unmuted there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering on the equipment costs to set up employees to work at home. Is this on their own equipment, or are we having to supply a whole bunch of additional equipment to support this?
Mr.
Thank you very much. So there's a couple of, it's a bit of a mixed bag right now. So when March hit, we were put quickly into this remote opportunity. Technology was very quick to catch up. Our IT team was phenomenal in getting the right licensing. There's still more work to be done on that. So we're focusing on that software and hardware case, laptops instead of desktops, for example, to facilitate that remote experience. We are considering potential small expense reimbursements for things that would support ergonomics and obviously the proper functioning there. Fact of the matter is some staff have taken some equipment home because of the nature of what we're doing right now to try and save on those costs as we go through the pandemic. Though as we become more thoughtful on remote work and we think about moving from allowing remote work to supporting remote work, there are those considerations on ergonomic desks, ergonomic chairs. Those are sort of the two main considerations that we're looking at. So there may be some small stipends that we could provide, and obviously nothing in stone there. But for the most part, staff have been using their own equipment up to this point.
Okay, thank you. And one final comment, and it may be more for Director Pegg. I was reading an interesting article on the Angus Reid poll on workplace culture. That was an article in the Toronto Star on the weekend. And when this report comes back to council, because I know that the staffer will be doing a report when the Simcoe District Health Unit says it's safe to go back to the regular place of work. I'd like to have some information included back to council. And here's my question. Because in this, I was really intrigued by this article where it says that we're working in stressful times. There's a perception of unfair and two systems, those people who are working on the ground, those people who are working from home, and also, I think also those that have children. So employees who have children are evaluated differently than those without to accommodate them to work at home. And I know it sort of references a little bit in this, but I just wonder when the report comes back, if you could also look at some feedback from staff as to their schedules and is there perception of unfair between those that have children, have to accommodate that, those that have had to come in, and those that have had to work at home. It would just be interesting to have that information back to council. And that's the end of my comments on this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kenny?
Thank you very much for the question. We did poll internal staff. We had about 141 responses on that internal survey. And the biggest thing that we found was that people can be productive. They feel they have good work-life balance, but there were a lot of those concerns about childcare. People are educating their children at home. These are uncertain times. The one thing that I like to educate staff with is, we're not actually getting the normal remote work experience. I try to tell people you're not working remotely, you're working at home during a pandemic. And it's different because often when you're working remote, you can work in different areas. You have access to a centralized office, which is what we would propose potentially over the long term to keep that in-person customer service that is so critical to what we provide. And, we have an internal culture here of excel, belong, and be your best self, but you're only seeing your coworkers in the context of work. So your culture becomes work very quickly instead of those three things. Remote work physically affects those whose function does allow it and on different sort of schedules. However, remote work and the benefits that it can provide in technology, communication, and other internal things that we can do with the customer experience will touch every corner of our organization, whether they be operations staff, park staff, facility monitors, firefighters. All of them will be impacted by the benefits that we can bring to our community through this project.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. I no longer call it working from home. I call it living at work. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks very much for the report. One thing I brought away from the report was that it was awfully rosy and a lot of benefits to the option, in terms of remote first. And I did a bit of research because I've heard personally of other issues raised because of the pandemic, but also working at home. And one of them is mental health in terms of you're now, not everyone has the same type of living accommodations. So some people, maybe somebody first timers just starting at work, are living in basements. Not the best place to be, be working on a continuous basis. So I am concerned that there's no mention of mental health issues related to this option and how we accommodate that. But the nice thing about it that it is only 40 to 60% of employees working from home. So it does allow for people to come into the office, because work is not only a place to get work done, but it's also about socializing. A lot of people, that's how they socialize. They talk to people, and also what comes out of that socialization is innovation. When you get people together talking, those types of things, it's not nearly as we found out using Zoom. It's not nearly as conducive to social interactions and to innovative thought processes. So I think there are some disadvantages to this that I think need to be talked about. The other item that was mentioned in this one article, that they've seen about a third or a 30%, a 33% drop in productivity from people working at home. So so I agree that it provides maybe some work-life balance, but there's some other things that we need to be aware of, and that they should be recognized as issues that that human resources needs to be aware of in terms of how do we address these types of things. So although I like the balanced approach that we've chosen here. That's kind of our motto is life work balance. I like what I see. I just want to make sure that we're well aware of these other issues that slight on the negative side. Thank you.
Mr. Kenny?
Lots to unpack there, but excellent questions. And I would add a couple of drawbacks to that: isolation, collaboration issues. Productivity, though, I would push back a little bit on that. There are studies involved that show productivity is up. It depends also on the sector that you're working in and your job function. And when we surveyed internal staff, we found that 90% found they were either as or more productive working remotely than from a town facility. Now, that's not 100%. And frankly, there are staff that do not have a suitable place at home to work. They don't feel they're productive working remotely. So that's where the remote first strategy comes in versus a 100% remote. I think under the circumstances that we're in right now, certainly it's not anybody's favorite. Not having access to a centralized place, only working virtually, and really not having that informal communication. And we actually found in that same staff survey that most people didn't miss anything to do necessarily with the work environment, but they missed the people from the office. And there's a bunch of mitigation measures. So this council report actually just touches the tip of the iceberg of the work we've done internally to support health and wellness, for example, those informal communication and collaboration opportunities. And we're in a bit of a unique circumstance again, where not everything can be rolled out right now. But if we do potentially continue with a partial remote or a remote first strategy, then having people into the office a little bit more frequently would allow for purposeful visits for collaboration, communication, and customer experience. And I think that'll benefit everyone. So it's certainly the tip of the iceberg. We could present a 30-page report, frankly, on the research that's been done and all the work that's being done internally to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Other Councillor Orsatti? Oh, and let me go to Director Pegg first, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to comment quickly on the mental health piece, because I do think it is incredibly critical. So your steering group has been having many conversations around the need for staff resiliency strategy that encompasses components like mental health. So that is definitely on our radar and something that we're working towards. So I just wanted to make sure that based on Councillor Waters' comments, that Council's aware that we're definitely looking into ways that we can better support staff during this unprecedented time. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sadi?
Thank you. And I think to Director Pegg, that's one of the disadvantages of 100% remote is the mental health, as Councillor Waters says, the lack of contact with other employees that do stimulate conversation, and some of the best ideas around the coffee stand. I refuse in a store to use the self-checkout because I believe that it takes away jobs from employees. And I look at 100% remote and I think of companies like Rogers, or try and get someone on your TV, whoever you use for your internet services. it's all remote in other countries. So we have to be a little careful of the roads that we can go down of where they take us, because you know, remote first and, you know, office first combinations, but 100% remote all the time. I just think you could have 100% remote working in another province. They don't need to be nearby.
I would say that the customer service at the town, particularly during COVID, has been exceptional beyond belief. The part of the report that struck me was the over double the amount from the digital inquiries went up. We had 159% increase in September in calls, and all of those handled by the same amount of staff. Absolutely incredible. Also, for those counselors who've been complaining to me how hard we're working, I think you saw in there the number of meetings, 31 meetings held. There was another report out, which seems we've been reading reports lately. This one was from the University of Windsor, and it's about municipalities, how they've handled the COVID outbreak and how transparent they were, and whether or not, and many councils don't have council meetings because they don't have them virtually, so they don't have council meetings, whereas we had twice as many as we would normally have, because we wanted to keep business going, and we wanted to deal with things that we wanted, like we did the youth engagement strategy, we updated the strategic plan. So we only didn't just do what we normally do, we upped our game and did the whole community strategy that included mental health as well. The Hack Lab and the library, and it was a real success story. All of the work that we did in even in Parks and Recreation, the town saw more registrations for the spring summer season than this year with COVID than they did the year before. So obviously there's a market for digital services, as long as there's that in-person contact as well. I think digital will be more popular when it's not the only option. When it's not, you're not doing it because you have to do it, you're doing it because it's more convenient. My one comment, if I could please, to Director Pegg and Mr. Kenny, was, would we be able to, with a remote first option, increase the number of hours that our customer services people would be available if it was remote? Like, could we think of maybe doing a couple of evening services or something if it's a remote service? Director Pegg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Absolutely, it's something that we would look at. I think our customer service team has shown us time and time again that they're willing to jump in and work basically whatever's necessary to serve our community. We're also very fortunate that we have a good working relationship with our Unifor bargaining unit that works with us on the hours of work for that particular group of employees. So I'm confident that we'd be able to come to some form of agreement around hours of work for that group, as we have in the past.
Thank you. My last comment then would be about the financial benefit, about the long-term need. Like, we're already kind of sitting on top of each other at Town Hall, and I don't think any of us wants to look at another mega project for another building. So that would definitely extend the life of our Town Hall. And then finally, the environmental impact. So I can tell you, I've gone from a tank of gas, 2 tanks of gas a week, to down to probably a tank of gas every month and a half. So definitely have some benefits there too. So those are my comments. Anyone else have any comments before we call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next, the Cross Street Bridge replacement. And oh, I feel so bad for that couple that was on, if they're still hanging out, I feel bad. We should have maybe pulled this and done it first so they wouldn't have had to wait so long. Who pulled it? I'm sorry. I think it was Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I pulled it because of the deputation, and it's in my ward, and it's one of the areas that floods yearly, and especially in the spring. But I do agree with the recommendation, because I've driven down there many times and thought to myself, why would they want to pull this bridge? It looks pretty darn good. So, and after I read the report where it says, you know, that it wouldn't make much difference in the flooding if they did redo that bridge, I agree with that. But I do also, I drove by and had a look at Mr. Hunter's property, and it is eroding, and I'm just wondering, you know, and I know that conservation has done things there in the past, and they do it, and in the spring it's gone, it washes away. And what they did is that, you know, it blocks the bridge and it makes flooding worse. So there has to be some kind of, you know, way to fix that, I hope. Don can look at that, because this poor man, he's spending money left, right, and center on trying to keep his banks together and his driveway in place. Those are my comments. And like I said, I agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder, Councillor?
I think
Councillor Sadi. Do we have Ms. Leal or Ms. Jenkins on the? Ms. Jenkins, hello. So question about the money for the bank stabilization. So does that go to private property owners? Did I read that correctly?
Through you, Your Worship, that money that we're proposing to repurpose would be to stabilize the embankments through the section that the town has recently been given ownership of. So that's the section of the creek between St. John's Road and Cross Street. If we did need to go on to private property to assist with these repairs, we would get permission to enter from those residents. And we have been consulting with them throughout this entire EA and EA process and the design process when we were originally looking at the bridge.
Thank you. Years ago, and I don't know if it's still around, maybe Councillor Waters will know, there was a program at LSRCA for, was it called LEAP? Environmental Assistance Program?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was one at the LCRCA, and I think it's still ongoing, I believe.
I'm just wondering if it would be an opportunity for some of these residents to apply for funding through the LEAP program for their bank stabilization.
It's certainly an opportunity. I could, you know, I'll look into it and see whether or not, and I'll report back to council at our next meeting that whether or not that program still exists and how people apply.
Great, thank you. Councillor Van Berkel?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think conservation did do something there some years ago. I remember, and I just have to think back, but they did something with pine trees and cables to try and stabilize that bank. And it did for a while until, like I said, the spring runoff, and you know, it just took everything out, and they wound up under the bridge. And that was probably the worst flood we had there in a long, long time. Haven't had one that bad since. So we definitely need to do something there more than, you know, stabilize it with a bunch of trees and cables.
Ms. Jenkins?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Van Berkel, our intent is to look at some shorter term solutions for the areas that are seeing significant immediate needs with the money that we're asking to repurpose. However, we do intend to look at the broader picture and the longer term solution through a couple of different studies. We're planning to look at, or we're proposing to complete a flooding strategy as part of our stormwater master plan update in 2021. So this is an area that we would look at through that strategy. There will also be another look taken at Banks Creek and the 7th line drainage improvements as we move into our orbit master planning processes, as there is, Banks Creek is an outlet to some of those lands that fall within the orbit development. So there are opportunities for us to look at, you know, things like decreasing flows upstream of this area to help with the flooding issues, making improvements to stormwater facilities that are upstream, you know, stormwater ponds, et cetera, that feed into this. So we're going to look at the broader solution through those strategies, but we do need to make some immediate repairs at this time. And yes, we are mindful that some of those repairs that were previously done did in fact wash out the following spring. So we are looking at doing something a little bit more solid, I would say, than what was put there in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Was that the area that we talked about not that long ago where we're going to divert some of the flow into the wetland? Or am I mixing it up with another project?
Through your worship, that would be a different project that's looking at Carson Creek and the wetland diversion for the Bel Air Creek area.
Right.
So that's not a part of this project.
Thank you. Too many flooding areas. Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. I certainly agree that we need to do anything we can to mitigate flooding and erosion, especially when you see those pictures of flooding on the lands and how that impacts. There's several recommendations in this report, and I'm just wondering on the municipal drain consideration. So staff recommending the review of the viability of this option for strategy for pending council approval, this item in 2021-2022 budget. So at that time, you will have a report to us in follow-up to this. But in the meantime, you'll be using the reserves that are left in this budget on smaller practices to start the process. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. I just would like, if you might, Ms. Jenkins, pass on to Ms. Leal those lovely comments from the presenter in the open forum. It's nice to hear from people, even whose houses are getting flooded, that they're finding our staff to be very helpful. So thank you for that. All right, we have a mover and a seconder. Could we call the vote on this motion? Are there any opposed? That is carried. That covers all of our items for this evening's Committee of the Whole. So we'll now rise and go back into council session to receive the Committee of the Whole report. And it's moved by Councillor Fowler and seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. And a recommendation to approve the Committee of the Whole report says resolutions of council, and that's Councillor Orsatti and Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That is carried. And finally, notices of motion. There are none this evening. And announcements. Does anybody have any announcements? Councillor Orsatti.
I think we all need little good news stories, and I'm just very proud of a resident in Ward 3, Jennifer Richardson, who has taken it on she's contacted all of council to have a house decorating contest for Halloween. And this is where residents would drive by and take a look at the house and give votes, and council will be doing that for their ward. I noticed last look, I think I'm up to 17 and others have 2. So anyway, which is to be expected, but not only, this is, I think it's at a time when many residents need something to look forward to. It's something enjoyable. I want to thank Jennifer for this. And there was actually an article in the Toronto Star about this as well. So you know, here we have residents putting us on the map for everybody needs a good news story. So I'm very happy. Residents can, they pay $10. The $10 goes to the food bank. They can go online or contact Jennifer Richardson through Facebook.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other announcements? I have two actually. One of them was Tim Hortons, the Cookstown Tim Hortons had the Smile Cookie campaign and divided the proceeds between the Thornton and Innisfil Idea Lab and Library and raised over $7,300. So we want to thank Tim Hortons for that. And finally, a really proud and so honored, it's such an honor deserved by Mark Gainick. Mark is a teacher at Nantar Shores. He's been there, I want to say right since the beginning, but I know he was there when my kids were there. And he has won the Prime Minister's Award of Excellence for teaching in Ontario. And he started the Enviro Venture program, which is like I think it's like a credit, like you go all year to this, and he's done just some amazing things. And I'll share, I won't bother you with all of it now, but I'll share with council the announcement so you can see it. And my office has sent a congratulations letter out to Mr. Gainick, and we're lucky to have him. So anything else for the good of council? Councillor Feller.
Just a side note, with Remembrance Day coming up in the next month, the Legions, instead of selling poppies this year, they've you can't say they haven't adapted. They're selling poppy masks. So I think this is like a really awesome way to help support our members who have gone to war, you know, and done things for the betterment of the country. So if you want to honor them, instead of wearing a poppy this year, you can actually, you know, wear it right on your face.
Councillor Asadi.
How do we purchase one of the masks, Ken?
I believe it's done through the local Legion. I believe the one in Belleward and Lefroy is currently selling them, if my understanding is correct.
I think I read between 3 and 5 was the time that it was available. Mr. Rayner, or anything for the good of the corporation? Mr. Keogh.
Hi there. Just wanted to say thank you, Your Worship, that we can definitely get that information that yourself and Councillor Fowler were referring to about the mask. That sounds like a great initiative. We can share that. Also, you might have noticed already, but just that the SMDHU did come out with some guidelines for those who are interested in trick-or-treating. So we'll be directing the public to that, but just thought that was also really helpful to get that out there. It would also be remiss to mention that, you know, we did talk about the newspaper ad that's going out tomorrow. It does have the old deadline of October 19th for getting in comments, but obviously we'll be mobilizing quite quickly to inform the public that that deadline is extended. You know, unfortunately, the paper only comes out bi-weekly, and they need their content at a certain time. So we thought it best, let's take the info we've got, let's get it out there so we get it in front of, you know, the thousands of residents. So potentially apologies in advance for any confusing emails, not our intention, but just wanted to let you know about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Johnny. And also the Ask a Planner, that'll be a fun Facebook. Is it Facebook Live or Zoom, or how are we doing that?
Your Worship, just because YouTube is kind of the most publicly accessible tool, because it's what we're all most familiar with, because we've got it locked and packed down with using Zoom to YouTube, and anyone can kind of go in and send their comments. We are sticking with YouTube. Obviously, we'll be sharing the details across all our channels so people can find those links.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so that's everything. So we'll move now to the confirming bylaw, and that's moved by Councillor Van Berkel and seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That's carried. And just before we adjourn, I'm going to ask if all of staff, if they wish to turn their video back on so we can see. I think it's really important that people who are tuning in get to see the amount of support that we have behind us and the amazing folks that make us look good. You know, we talk about the number of council meetings that we had and how tiring it is for us, but understand that the reports have to be written and the council meetings have to be set up, and Dave's got to sit in the council chamber and run all the IT, and clerks have to make sure that everything's done properly. And so we do really appreciate everything that you do for us. And I hope you have a very good night, and we will adjourn. And that is moved by Councillor Nicol and seconded by Councillor Fowler, that we adjourn at 10:04 p.m. Have a wonderful evening, all in favor? Any opposed? Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Good night,
everyone.